When my husband's mistress stood over my casket and declared, "Finally, she's gone. Now everything is mine," I felt a cold rage wash over me unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Days later, I was watching her faint in our lawyer's office when I walked in very much alive. That's when I realized revenge isn't just a dish best served cold, it's best served from beyond the grave. If you're watching this, subscribe now and tell me if you've ever fantasized about attending your own funeral. Trust me, what comes next will make your jaw drop. The day I decided to fake my own death wasn't particularly special. It was a Tuesday, raining slightly, and I was sitting at our kitchen island staring at my husband Richard's phone. He'd left it unlocked while he showered, a careless mistake from a man who'd grown too comfortable in his deception. The text messages glowed up at me like neon signs of betrayal. "Can't wait to see you tonight. She thinks I'm at a conference in Chicago."
She.
That's what I'd become after 23 years of marriage. Not Elaine, not sweetheart, not darling. Just she. An obstacle and inconvenience. The woman's name was Vanessa Sinclair. I'd known about her for almost a year, but knowing and confronting are different animals entirely. At first, I told myself it was a phase, something he'd grow tired of. Then I convinced myself that preserving our social standing was worth my dignity. Richard Blackwell was, after all, one of the most respected cardiac surgeons in Manhattan. We had a reputation. We had friends in high places. We had a life I'd meticulously built, thread by precious thread. But that morning, reading those messages, something inside me finally snapped. "I can't keep doing this forever," Vanessa had written. "You won't have to," my husband replied. "I promise." What exactly was he promising? A divorce? My elimination? The question haunted me as I scrolled through months of their correspondence. That's when I saw it, a message from 3 weeks earlier. I checked her life insurance policy again. $5 million. Enough to start over anywhere we want. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. He wasn't just betraying me with his body. He was contemplating betraying me with my life. The shower upstairs was still running. I had perhaps 5 minutes before he'd come downstairs, kiss my cheek absently, and leave for the hospital, where he saved lives while plotting to end mine. I called Marcus Harrington, not just my lawyer, but my oldest friend from college. His voice was groggy. It wasn't even 7 a.m. "Marcus, I need to disappear. Today." There was a pause. "Elaine? What's happened?" "Richard's planning something. Something bad. I found messages about my life insurance." Another pause, longer this time. "Come to my office. Use the back entrance. Don't tell anyone where you're going." That was 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks of elaborate planning, of living in Marcus's lake house upstate, of watching from afar as the news broke. Prominent surgeon's wife missing, feared dead. Richard played his part beautifully, the devastated husband, the man broken by mysterious tragedy. He organized search parties. He wept on local television. He offered a reward for information. And then, 3 weeks in, they found my car submerged in the Hudson River. No body. The current had supposedly carried it away, but enough of my personal effects to make it convincing. The memorial service was scheduled for the following Saturday. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Marcus asked as he adjusted my wig, a short, auburn bob, nothing like my usual long blonde hair. "Once you show up at that funeral, there's no going back." "I'm sure," I replied, applying a layer of makeup that subtly altered the shape of my face. "I need to know what he'll do when he thinks I'm really gone." The funeral home was packed. Richard had spared no expense. Enormous arrangements of white lilies and roses surrounded an empty casket. A large portrait of me from our 20th anniversary party stood on an easel, draped in black ribbon. I slipped in with the last of the mourners, taking a seat in the back row, my face partially obscured by a black netted veil. Richard sat in the front row, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking with what appeared to be sobs. Our friends patted his back, whispered comforting words. Our daughter Sophia, home from college, sat beside him, her face pale and drawn. My heart ached seeing her pain, but Marcus had insisted we couldn't tell her the truth. The more genuine the reactions, the more convincing this will be, he'd said. The service progressed with eulogies from my sister Claire, my best friend Diane, and finally Richard himself. He stood at the podium, his handsome face etched with grief, and spoke of our love story. How we'd met in medical school, how I'd supported him through his residency, how we'd built our life together. Elaine was my North Star, he said, his voice breaking. Without her, I'm lost at sea. I almost laughed out loud at the performance. The man deserved an Oscar. Then the side door opened, and she walked in. Vanessa Sinclair was younger than me, mid-30s to my 48, with the kind of confident beauty that comes from knowing men desire you. Her black dress was expensive, but inappropriately tight for a funeral, her heels too high, her lipstick too red. She slid into a seat in the middle row, and I watched as several heads turned. People knew who she was, or at least suspected. After the service, during the reception line, I watched her approach Richard. She didn't touch him. They were careful about that, but she stood closer than a mere colleague would. I inched forward, keeping my distance, but straining to hear their exchange. "You're holding up well," she murmured. "It's all I can do to stand upright," he replied, loud enough for others to hear. But then she leaned in closer, her lips almost brushing his ear, and whispered something that made his eyes widen slightly before he composed himself. I couldn't hear what she said, but the intimacy of the gesture was unmistakable. I followed them discreetly as they moved through the reception. Richard maintained his grieving widower facade, but Vanessa grew bolder as the afternoon progressed. When most guests had departed, I watched her corner him near the bathroom hallway. "How long do we have to wait?" she asked, her voice low but urgent. "The lawyer's reading the will on Wednesday," Richard replied. "Everything should transfer quickly. The house might take longer to sell." "Sell?" She looked surprised. "Why would we sell that gorgeous house?" Richard glanced around nervously. "We can't stay there, Vanessa. People would talk." She laughed, a tinkling, artificial sound. "Let them talk. I've waited long enough to be Mrs. Blackwell." My blood boiled as I watched them from behind a large floral arrangement. Mrs. Blackwell? She wasn't just after my husband and my money. She wanted my life, my identity. "We agreed to be discreet," Richard hissed. "At least for a year." "That was before," she replied, running a finger down his tie. "Things have changed. I'm tired of hiding, Richard." He caught her hand. "Not here." She pouted but stepped back. "Fine. I'll see you at home." At home. My home. The Georgian colonial I'd renovated room by room. The garden I'd planted with my own hands. The kitchen where I'd hosted countless dinner parties. The bedroom where I cut that thought off before it could fully form. I was so engrossed in my rage that I almost missed what happened next. Vanessa turned away from Richard and walked directly toward the portrait of me. She stood before it, staring at my smiling face for a long moment. Then, when she thought no one was looking, she leaned in and whispered to my photograph. "Finally, she's gone. Now everything is mine." The words sliced through me like a blade. I gripped the edge of a nearby table to steady myself as she sauntered away, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the floor of Marcus's lake house, replaying the scene over and over. The sheer audacity, the cruelty of that woman. And Richard, the man I'd loved for half my life. Allowing it, enabling it, planning it. "I need more," I told Marcus over the phone at midnight. "The funeral isn't enough. I need to see how far they'll go." "The will reading is in 3 days," Marcus reminded me. "That's the next phase." "No," I said firmly. "I need to know what they're doing in my house. Tonight." Marcus sighed. "Elaine, breaking into your own home when everyone thinks you're dead could jeopardize everything. If someone sees you, no one will see me," I insisted. "I just need to know, Marcus. I need to see with my own eyes." Against his better judgment, Marcus drove me back to the city that night. We parked a block away from my Westchester home, and I slipped through the back garden I knew like the lines on my palm. There was a key hidden in a false rock near the greenhouse, a secret even Richard didn't know about. The house was dark except for a soft glow coming from the master bedroom. I crept through the kitchen, past the living room, up the back staircase that the household staff used. As I approached my bedroom, I heard voices, laughter, the clink of glasses. The door was slightly ajar. I peered through the crack and felt my world collapse all over again. They were in my bed, the bed where I'd slept for 20 years. Richard was propped against the headboard, wearing nothing but his boxer shorts, a glass of champagne in his hand. Vanessa lounged beside him, wrapped in my silk robe, the royal blue one Richard had given me for our anniversary. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. "To us," Richard replied, clinking his glass against hers. "And to freedom." "When can I move my things in?" she asked, tracing circles on his chest. "Let's get through the will reading first," he said. "But soon, very soon." She reached over to the nightstand, my nightstand, and picked up a small velvet box. My jewelry box. She opened it and pulled out my grandmother's diamond ring, slipping it onto her finger. "This will need to be resized," she said, admiring how it caught the light. "Your wife had fat fingers." Richard laughed, actually laughed, and took another sip of champagne. "Take whatever you want. It's all yours now." I must have made a sound, a gasp, a whimper, something, because Richard suddenly sat up straighter, looking toward the door. "Did you hear that?" he asked. I retreated quickly, my heart pounding in my ears. I fled down the back stairs, through the kitchen, and out the door I'd entered, not stopping until I reached Marcus's car. "Drive," I gasped as I threw myself into the passenger seat. "Just drive." Marcus took one look at my face and pulled away from the curb. We were halfway back to the lake house before I could speak again. "They're drinking champagne in my bed," I said, my voice hollow. "She's wearing my clothes, trying on my jewelry." Marcus reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry, Elaine." "Don't be sorry," I replied, a strange calm settling over me. "Be ready, because on Wednesday, I'm going to destroy them both." The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus and I rehearsed every detail of our plan. He showed me the documents he'd prepared, the legal traps he'd set, the evidence he'd collected over the past 6 weeks. "Richard transferred $50,000 to an offshore account the day after your accident," Marcus told me, showing me the bank records he'd subpoenaed as part of the estate proceedings. "And he's made inquiries about selling your art collection." My art collection. Pieces I'd carefully acquired over decades. The Rothko print Richard had always hated. The small Krasner that had appreciated tenfold since I'd purchased it. The contemporary pieces by women artists I'd championed. "Is there anything he's not trying to liquidate?" I asked bitterly. Marcus hesitated. "Your jewelry. He's keeping that." For Vanessa, I thought. For the woman who'd mocked my fat fingers while trying on my grandmother's ring. The morning of the will reading dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a tailored black suit, not morning clothes, but clothes of power. Marcus had arranged for a private entrance to the law firm's offices. I would wait in an adjoining conference room until the perfect moment. Through a one-way glass panel, I watched as they arrived. Richard first, somber in a dark suit, carrying the grief of a new widower like a well-worn coat. Then my sister Claire, her eyes red-rimmed from genuine tears. My daughter Sophia, looking so small and lost that I almost abandoned the plan right then. A few other relatives and close friends followed. And then Vanessa. She swept in wearing a black fur coat that I recognized instantly mine, from the back of my closet, a vintage piece I rarely wore but treasured. Beneath it, a black dress that hugged every curve. Her hair was styled in a sophisticated updo, and around her neck, my breath caught, was my diamond pendant. Not costume jewelry or a gift Richard had bought for her. My pendant, the one that had belonged to my mother. "Everyone, please be seated," Marcus began formally. "We're here for the reading of Elaine Blackwell's last will and testament." Richard sat front and center, his expression appropriately grave. Vanessa took a seat directly behind him, close but not too close. A united front with plausible deniability. "Before we begin," Marcus continued, "Mrs. Blackwell made a video statement that she wished to be played at this gathering." Richard's head snapped up. "A video? You never mentioned a video." Marcus smiled thinly. It was Mrs. Blackwell's explicit instruction that no one be informed of this recording before today. He pressed a button on a remote, and the large screen on the wall came to life. There I was, the real me, not the disguised version waiting in the next room, recorded 6 weeks earlier in this very office. If you're watching this, my recorded self said, then I am presumed dead. And if I am presumed dead, it's because someone wanted me that way. Gasps filled the room. Richard's face drained of color. For the past year, the recording continued, I have been aware of my husband's affair with Vanessa Sinclair. All heads turned toward Vanessa, who sat frozen, her red lips parted in shock. I've known about their late-night meetings, their weekend conferences, the gifts charged to our joint credit card. What I didn't know, until recently, was that they had discussed a more permanent solution to their problem, me. Richard stood abruptly. This is preposterous. Marcus. Turn that off immediately. Sit down, Dr. Blackwell. Marcus said firmly. The video will play in its entirety. On screen, I held up printed copies of text messages. 3 weeks ago, my husband and Ms. Sinclair discussed my life insurance policy. $5 million, and I quote, enough to start over anywhere we want. Sophia made a choked sound, staring at her father in horror. I don't know if they planned an accident or something that would look like natural causes, the recording continued. But I do know this. I refuse to be a victim. So, I've made arrangements of my own. That was my cue. I opened the conference room door and stepped into the main room. The effect was electric. Claire screamed. Sophia jumped to her feet, swaying as if she might faint. Richard's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. But it was Vanessa's reaction that satisfied me most. She shot to her feet, pointing at me like she'd seen a ghost, which, in her mind, she had. You're supposed to be dead, she whispered, her voice rising to a shriek as her eyes rolled back. She crumpled to the floor in a dead faint, the fur coat splaying around her like a dark halo. No one moved to help her. All eyes were on me as I walked calmly to the front of the room. As you can see, I said, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Richard found his voice at last. Elaine, what is the meaning of this? Do you have any idea what you've put us through? What you've put our daughter through? His audacity was breathtaking. I turned to him slowly. What I've put you through? I repeated. That's rich coming from the man who is discussing my life insurance policy with his mistress. That's not. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I cut him off. And so does everyone else in this room now. Sophia stood trembling, tears streaming down her face. Dad, is it true? Were you and her? Richard reached for our daughter. Sophia, sweetheart, it's complicated. She jerked away from his touch. Answer me. Before he could respond, Vanessa stirred on the floor, pushing herself up groggily. Her gaze landed on me, and she scrambled backward like a crab. This isn't possible, she muttered. You were in the river. They found your car. They found my car, I confirmed. Not me. Marcus stepped forward. All business now. Since Mrs. Blackwell is very much alive, there will be no reading of a will today. Instead, I have some other documents to present. He handed Richard a thick envelope. Divorce papers, Dr. Blackwell. My client is citing adultery and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, possibly murder. Richard tore open the envelope, scanning the documents with growing horror. You can't prove any conspiracy. These texts prove nothing. Perhaps not in criminal court, Marcus agreed. But in the court of public opinion? In a civil proceeding? With testimony from your paramour who's wearing stolen property right now? I like our chances. As if suddenly aware of her adornments, Vanessa's hand flew to the diamond pendant at her throat. Richard gave these to me, she protested weakly. My mother's pendant? I asked, stepping closer to her. My grandmother's ring? My fur coat? Did he give you my identity too, Vanessa? Is that why you whispered to my portrait at the funeral? Finally, she's gone. Now everything is mine? Her face contorted with rage and fear. You were there? You spied on your own funeral? I attended my own funeral. I corrected her. and learned exactly who was grieving and who was celebrating. Richard stepped between us. Elaine, be reasonable. We can discuss this privately. As a family. I laughed, a cold, hard sound I barely recognized as my own. Family? You forfeited that right when you plotted with your mistress in our bed. When you gave her my clothes, my jewelry, my home. Mom, Sophia said quietly, coming to stand beside me. Is this why you disappeared? You thought Dad and this woman were planning to hurt you. I softened, touching my daughter's tear-stained face. I didn't know what they were planning, sweetheart. But I knew I needed to find out. I'm so sorry you had to go through this. Sophia turned to her father, her young face suddenly old with pain. How could you? Richard had no answer. None that would suffice. Marcus cleared his throat. There's more. Mrs. Blackwell has already filed restraining orders against both Dr. Blackwell and Ms. Sinclair. Neither of you is to approach her or enter the Westchester property, which is solely in Mrs. Blackwell's name. That's our home, Richard protested. Your name isn't on the deed, Marcus replied calmly, a fact you seem to have overlooked in your rush to sell it. By now, Vanessa had recovered enough to stagger to her feet. She yanked off the diamond ring and threw it at me. Take your trinkets. Take your dusty old house. You've ruined everything. I caught the ring easily.
No, Vanessa.
You and Richard ruined everything. I'm just making sure you don't profit from the destruction. She turned to Richard, her beautiful face ugly with fury. You promised me. You said everything was taken care of. Richard grabbed her arm roughly. Shut up, Vanessa. Too late. The implications of her words hung in the air like poison gas. Sophia made a small, wounded sound and backed away from her father as if seeing him for the first time. I think we're done here, Marcus announced, gathering his papers. Mrs. Blackwell, shall we? I nodded, then paused, turning back to face my husband and his mistress one last time. Enjoy the champagne while it lasts. I have a feeling you'll both be too busy with depositions and police interviews to celebrate much longer. I walked out with my head high, Sophia's hand clutched in mine, leaving Richard and Vanessa staring after us in stunned silence. The first act of my resurrection was complete, but the drama was far from over. Richard Blackwell had resources, connections, and a lifetime of charm to deploy. Vanessa Sinclair had youth, beauty, and a surprising capacity for calculation. And I had only just begun to fight. That night, as Sophia slept in the guest room of the hotel suite Marcus had arranged, I stood at the window looking out at the glittering city. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. You think you've won, but this isn't over. Not by a long shot. Enjoy your victory while you can. I smiled grimly at the transparent threat. Richard or Vanessa, it hardly mattered which one had sent it. They were united now not by love, but by desperation.
My phone buzzed again.
This time it was Marcus. Turn on Channel 4.
Now.
I grabbed the remote and flipped to the local news just in time to see Richard's face fill the screen. He stood on the steps of what appeared to be another lawyer's office, his expression earnest and concerned. My wife has suffered a severe psychological break, he was saying to a cluster of reporters. Her disappearance, this elaborate hoax about her death, these are the actions of someone in the midst of a profound mental health crisis. As a doctor, and as her husband of 23 years, I'm deeply concerned for her well-being. I sank onto the edge of the bed as he continued. The accusations she's made are symptomatic of paranoid delusions. I'm working with specialists to get her the help she desperately needs, and I ask for privacy during this difficult time. A reporter thrust a microphone closer. Dr. Blackwell, what about the allegations of an affair with Vanessa Sinclair? Richard's face registered perfect compassionate concern. Ms. Sinclair is a valued colleague who has been supportive during this traumatic period. My wife's fixation on her is another symptom of her condition. I would ask the media to respect Ms. Sinclair's privacy as well. The camera panned to show Vanessa standing slightly behind him, demurely dressed in a high-necked blouse, her expression a masterpiece of concerned sympathy. We all just want Elaine to get better, she said softly. I threw the remote at the television, my hands shaking with rage. They were trying to paint me as insane. And Richard, with his medical credentials and sterling reputation, might just be convincing enough to pull it off. My phone rang Marcus again. I said before he could speak. "We need to counter this immediately," he replied. "He's laying groundwork for a competency challenge. If he can convince a judge you're mentally unfit, he could gain control of everything." "He won't," I said with a conviction I didn't entirely feel. "We have evidence. We have witnesses who saw her at the funeral, at the will reading." "Evidence can be explained away," Marcus warned. "Witnesses can be pressured. Richard has powerful friends, Elaine." I paced the hotel room, mind racing. "Then we need more. We need to be one step ahead of them." "What are you thinking?" I paused, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. In the glass, I could almost see the old Elaine, the trusting wife, the perfect hostess, the woman who looked the other way, fading like a ghost. "I'm thinking it's time to dig deeper," I replied. "Richard's been a successful surgeon for 20 years. Vanessa's worked with him for 3. There must be other secrets they're hiding. Other women. Financial irregularities. Something we can use." "That's dangerous territory," Marcus cautioned. "If they're painting you as paranoid, investigating them could feed into that narrative." "Then we'll be careful," I insisted. "But I won't let them rewrite history. I won't let them turn me into the villain of this story." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, trembling with a mixture of fury and fear. They had escalated from private betrayal to public character assassination in the space of a few hours. What would be next? My gaze fell on my open suitcase where a small silver frame peeked out, a photo of Richard, Sophia, and me from happier days. We were on our boat, the summer sun turning our hair golden, our smiles wide and genuine. Or at least, I'd thought they were genuine. How long had Richard been plotting? How many other women had there been before Vanessa? How much of my life had been a carefully constructed lie? I picked up my phone again and dialed a number I never thought I'd use, Richard's former nurse, Janet Phillips. She'd left his practice 2 years earlier under mysterious circumstances. At the time, Richard had said she was incompetent, but I'd always suspected there was more to the story. "Mrs. Blackwell?" Her voice was surprised when she answered. "I thought," the news said. "I'm very much alive," I said, "and I need your help." There was a long pause before she replied, "I've been waiting for this call for a long time." As I listened to Janet's story, of harassment, of threats, of a pattern of behavior stretching back years, I felt a cold certainty settle in my bones. This wasn't just about Vanessa. This wasn't just about me. This was about a man who had spent decades abusing his power, his position, and the trust of those around him. And it was time someone stopped him. I hung up with Janet just as dawn was breaking over the city. My mind was racing with new information, new possibilities, new avenues of attack. I'd started this as a way to expose a betrayal and reclaim my dignity. But now I understood it was about more than that. It was about justice. A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. Sophia stood there in borrowed pajamas, her eyes puffy from crying. "Mom," she said in a small voice, "I saw Dad on the news last night. Is he really telling people you're crazy?" I opened my arms, and she came to me, burying her face against my shoulder like she had as a little girl. "Your father is scared," I told her gently. "When people are scared, they sometimes do desperate things." "I don't understand any of this," she whispered. "Last week I thought you were dead. Now you're alive, but everything else is broken." I stroked her hair, my heart aching for what she was going through. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm so sorry you're caught in the middle of this. But I promise you, when this is over, the truth will be clear. All of it." She pulled back to look at me, her young face troubled. "What happens now?" A good question, one I wasn't entirely sure how to answer. But as I held my daughter, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Richard and Vanessa had underestimated me once. They wouldn't get the chance to do it again. "Now," I said, "we fight back." What I didn't tell Sophia was how. I didn't tell her about Janet Phillips, or about the other names Janet had given me, other women with stories similar to hers. I didn't tell her about the financial discrepancies Marcus had discovered, suggesting Richard might be siphoning money from the medical practice. And I certainly didn't tell her about the plan forming in my mind, a plan that would either vindicate me completely or destroy what little remained of our family's reputation. Because sometimes, to rebuild, you first have to burn everything to the ground. Outside the hotel window, the city was coming alive with morning light. Somewhere out there, Richard and Vanessa were plotting their next move, confident in their ability to outwit me, to discredit me, to defeat me. Let them try. I picked up my phone and texted Marcus, ready for phase 2. Then I turned to my daughter with a smile that held more confidence than I felt. Breakfast? We have a long day ahead. The battle lines were drawn. The stage was set. And I, Elaine Blackwell, the woman who had attended her own funeral, was about to give the performance of a lifetime. The first reporter called while Sophia and I were having breakfast. My phone lit up with an unfamiliar number, and I almost ignored it. But something, instinct perhaps, made me answer. Mrs. Blackwell? This is Andrea Winters from the New York Daily Chronicle. We're running a story on your situation and would like your comment on your husband's statement that you're suffering from a mental health crisis. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Ms. Winters, I appreciate your call, but I'm curious. Did you seek my comment before or after you spoke with my husband? There was an awkward pause. Well, Dr. Blackwell held a press conference, so you're writing about me based solely on his version of events. I finished for her. That's not journalism, Ms. Winters. That's transcription. Subscribe and share the story if you've ever had to fight to reclaim your own narrative. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is simply your voice. Mrs. Blackwell, we'd like to present a balance. Balanced would have been calling me first, I said. But since you're on the phone now, I'll give you an exclusive. I'm holding my own press conference today at noon. The Plaza Hotel, Terrace Room. I suggest you be there if you want the real story. I hung up before she could respond. Sophia was staring at me, her toast forgotten on her plate. A press conference? She asked. Mom, are you sure that's a good idea? It's the only way, I replied, already dialing Marcus. Your father has made this public. If I don't respond, his narrative becomes the truth. Marcus answered on the first ring. I was just about to call you. Have you seen the news? Yes. We're holding a press conference at noon. Can you book the terrace room at the plaza? There was a pause. Elaine, we should discuss strategy before. There's no time. I cut him off. Richard is painting me as delusional as we speak. Every hour I stay silent is an hour people believe him. Marcus sighed heavily. The plaza won't work on such short notice. But I can get us the conference room at my firm. Noon is possible.
Done.
And Marcus? Contact Janet Phillips. Tell her I need her there. Another pause, longer this time. Are you sure you want to go that route? Once you start bringing in these other women, there's no going back. Richard crossed that line when he went on television and called me mentally ill. I said, now it's war. After hanging up, I turned to find Sophia watching me with wide, troubled eyes. Who's Janet Phillips? She asked quietly. I hesitated. How much should I tell my daughter? She was 20, legally an adult but still so young. The full truth about her father would devastate her. She used to work with your father, I said carefully. And Sophia pressed, suddenly looking very much like me when I sensed someone was holding back. I sat down beside her, taking her hands in mine. Sweetheart, your father has a history of inappropriate behavior with women who work for him. Janet is one of them. Sophia pulled her hands away. You mean he cheated with her too? It's more complicated than that, I said. Janet didn't welcome his attention. When she rejected him, he fired her and ruined her reputation in the medical community. Sophia stared at me, her face pale. How long have you known this? I suspected something when she left, I admitted. But I didn't know the details until last night. I called her after seeing your father on the news. So you're going to what? Expose Dad publicly? Ruin him? The hurt in her voice cut me deeply. Despite everything, she still loved her father, still wanted to protect him, even as he was trying to destroy me. "I'm going to tell the truth," I said gently. "Richard made this public. He's trying to take away not just my reputation but my agency, my very sanity. I can't let him do that." Sophia stood abruptly, pushing away from the table. "This is so messed up. A week ago, my biggest worry was midterms. Now my mom's back from the dead, my dad's having an affair, and you're both about to destroy each other on national television." "Sophia, I need some air," she said, already heading for the door. "I'll be back before your press conference." After she left, I sat alone in the silent hotel suite, doubts crowding in. Was I doing the right thing? Was there another way to fight Richard that wouldn't further traumatize our daughter? My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Room booked. Janet confirmed. Also, check your email. Something you need to see." I opened my laptop and found Marcus's message at the top of my inbox. The subject line read simply, "Urgent, hospital records." Attached was a PDF, medical records from Richard's hospital. Patient names were redacted, but dates, treatments, and billing codes were visible. It took me a moment to understand what I was looking at. "Marcus." I breathed as I called him back. "Where did you get these?" "Janet had them," he replied without preamble. "She made copies before she left. She was building a case against Richard but got scared off when he threatened to sue her for defamation." I scrolled through the documents, my horror growing. These show he was billing for procedures he never performed. "Not just that," Marcus said grimly. "Look at the dates on pages 17 to 24. I flipped to the indicated pages and felt the blood drain from my face. These are from when he was supposedly at conferences with Vanessa.
Exactly.
They were never at conferences. They were in New York, billing Richard's practice for ghost surgeries while having their affair on the hospital's dime. My mind raced. This is insurance fraud. At minimum, Marcus agreed. Possibly criminal negligence too, if patients were receiving substandard care while he falsified records. I sat back, stunned by the implications. This changes everything. "It does," Marcus said cautiously. "But Elaine, using these documents is risky. They were obtained irregularly." "You mean illegally?" "I mean Janet could face serious consequences for taking them. And if Richard finds out we have them before we can establish their authenticity through proper channels, he'll destroy them," I finished. "And probably Janet too." I thought of Sophia, of her pain when she'd left the hotel room, of how much worse it would be when she learned her father wasn't just an adulterer, but potentially a criminal. "What do you advise?" I asked finally. Marcus was silent for a long moment. "We need to be strategic. The press conference is still on, but we don't reveal everything at once. We focus on your story, the faked death, the evidence of Richard's affair, his attempt to discredit you. We hint at more to come but hold back the fraud allegations until we've secured the documents properly." "And how do we do that?" "I have contacts at the State Medical Board," he said. "If we can get them to launch an investigation, they can subpoena the original records. That way, Janet's copies become corroborating evidence rather than stolen property." It made sense. A measured approach. Build the case step by step rather than going nuclear immediately. "All right," I agreed. "But we need to move quickly. Richard won't wait to escalate." As if on cue, my phone rang with another call, this time from my sister Claire. "Elaine," she said when I answered, her voice tight with tension. "There are 2 police officers at my door asking about you." My heart stuttered. "Police?
What do they want?"
"They said something about a welfare check," Claire replied. "They have concerns about your mental state and potential self-harm." "Elaine, what the hell is going on?" "Richard. It had to be. He was using his connections to build his narrative of my supposed instability." "Don't tell them anything," I said urgently. "Just say you haven't seen me since the will reading. And Claire, be careful what you say on the phone. I wouldn't put it past Richard to be monitoring your calls." After hanging up, I called Marcus again to relay this new development. "He's moving faster than I anticipated," Marcus said, his voice grim. A welfare check is just the beginning. If he can convince authorities you're a danger to yourself or others. He could have me committed, I finished, a chill running down my spine. Involuntarily hospitalized.
Exactly.
And as your husband and a respected doctor, his concerns would carry significant weight. I paced the hotel room, anger and fear warring within me. So, what do we do? Change of plans, Marcus said decisively. The press conference days, but we move up the timeline. I'm going to contact my source at the medical board immediately. And Elaine? Don't go anywhere alone. Not even within the hotel. Richard might have people watching. After we hung up, I stood at the window, looking down at the street below. Was someone down there watching the hotel? Waiting for me to appear? The thought made me feel like a prisoner, trapped by Richard's machinations even as I tried to expose his betrayal. My phone chimed with a text message. Unknown number again. Check your email.
Now.
I hesitated, suspecting another threat from Richard or Vanessa. But when I opened my email, I found a message from an anonymous account. The subject line: "Thought you should see this." The attachment was a single photograph, Richard and Vanessa entering what appeared to be a psychiatric facility. The timestamp showed it was taken just an hour ago. Cold dread washed over me. What were they doing at a psychiatric hospital? Then the answer hit me with sickening clarity. They were laying groundwork, consulting with psychiatrists who could later testify about my supposed condition, building a case for involuntary commitment. The walls seemed to close in around me. I needed to get out, to clear my head, to think. But Marcus's warning echoed in my mind. Don't go anywhere alone. I texted Sophia. Where are you? Please come back to the hotel. It's urgent. No response. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. Panic fluttered in my chest. Where was my daughter? Had Richard gotten to her somehow? I was about to call Marcus again when there was a knock at the door. Relief flooded through me. Sophia must have forgotten her key. I rushed to open it without checking the peephole. Big mistake. 2 uniformed police officers stood in the hallway. Elaine Blackwell? The female officer asked. I nodded mutely, my mouth suddenly dry. We'd like you to come with us, ma'am. Your husband is concerned about your welfare. I gripped the door frame, fighting the urge to slam the door shut. I'm fine, officers. As you can see, I'm perfectly well. The male officer stepped forward slightly. Ma'am, we have an order for a psychiatric evaluation. We'd appreciate your cooperation. An order? How had Richard managed that so quickly? Unless he'd been planning this contingency all along, had the paperwork ready to go as soon as I reappeared. I'd like to see that order, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. And I'd like to call my lawyer. The officers exchanged glances. You can call your lawyer from a hospital, the female officer said. Please, Mrs. Blackwell. We don't want to make this any more difficult than it needs to be. Translation: come quietly, or we'll take you by force. My mind raced. If I went with them, I'd be playing right into Richard's hands. Once I was in a psychiatric facility, he could control the narrative completely. But if I resisted, I'd look exactly like the unstable person he was painting me to be. May I at least get my purse? I asked, trying to buy time. The female officer nodded. Of course. I stepped back into the room, leaving the door open but moving quickly to my purse on the desk. As I picked it up, I sent a hasty text to Marcus. 911. Police at hotel room with psych order. Taking me in. Then I slipped my phone into my pocket and returned to the door with deliberate calm. I'm ready. The officers led me down the hall to the elevator. As we waited, I forced myself to breathe evenly, to appear cooperative while my mind frantically sought a way out of this trap. The elevator doors opened, and we stepped inside. As they closed again, I saw a familiar figure hurrying down the hallway, Sophia, returning just moments too late. That's my daughter, I said urgently. Please, can I just tell her what's happening? I'm sorry, ma'am, the male officer replied. We need to proceed directly to the facility. The doors closed, cutting off my last glimpse of Sophia's confused face. I felt sick with helplessness. In the lobby, they escorted me efficiently toward the exit. People stared as we passed. A well-dressed woman flanked by police officers always draws attention, but no one intervened. Why would they? To all appearances, this was a routine matter, authorities doing their job. Outside, a patrol car waited at the curb. The female officer opened the back door, and I hesitated, one last desperate glance around the street. No sign of Marcus.
No miraculous rescue.
I was about to duck into the car when a voice called out, "Officers, wait." We turned to see a woman hurrying toward us, waving a document. It took me a moment to recognize her. Janet Phillips, Richard's former nurse, looking very different in a crisp business suit than she had in hospital scrubs. "I have an emergency stay on that order," she said breathlessly, thrusting the paper at the male officer. He frowned, scanning the document. This was issued 10 minutes ago. "By Judge Ramirez," Janet confirmed. Mrs. Blackwell's attorney filed it electronically when he learned of the attempt to remove her. The officers conferred quietly, examining the document. I stood frozen, afraid to hope this reprieve was real. Finally, the female officer turned to me. "It appears there's a legal challenge to the evaluation order. We'll need to wait for clarification from the court." Relief made my knees weak. "So, I'm free to go?" "For now," she said, her expression neutral, but her eyes sympathetic. "But Mrs. Blackwell? If you're experiencing difficulties, please consider seeking help voluntarily. It's always better that way." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As the officers returned to their vehicle, Janet took my arm. "Let's get inside quickly," she murmured. "Your lawyer is on his way." Back in the hotel lobby, I finally found my voice. "How did you?" "Marcus called me when he got your text," Janet explained, guiding me toward the elevators. "I was already on my way to meet you before the press conference. He had the stay prepared as a precaution and just needed a judge's signature. I happen to know Judge Ramirez from a previous case." The elevator doors opened, and Sophia burst out, nearly colliding with us. "Mom," she cried, throwing her arms around me. "What's happening?" "I saw the police." "Let's talk upstairs," I said, gently guiding her back into the elevator. "It's not safe here." In the room, I explained the situation as calmly as I could, watching Sophia's expression shift from confusion to horror to fury. "Dad did this," she demanded, pacing the room. "He tried to have you locked up?" "It appears that way," I said carefully. That's evil," she said, her voice breaking. "How could he do this to you?"
To us.
I had no good answer. Only the cold certainty that Richard would try again, and soon. Janet, who had been quietly observing our exchange, spoke up. "Mrs. Blackwell, we don't have much time. Your husband will find out the order was stayed, and he'll have a backup plan." "Call me Elaine, please," I said. "And you're right. The press conference is in." I checked my watch, 90 minutes. "We need to be ready." "I'm coming with you," Sophia said firmly. I hesitated. "Sweetheart, are you sure? Once you're seen publicly taking my side." "I don't care," she interrupted. "Dad tried to have you committed. He's been cheating on you and lying to me. I'm done protecting him." The fierce determination in her eyes reminded me so much of myself at her age that it took my breath away. I nodded, swallowing hard against the surge of emotion.
"All right.
Let's get ready." Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, looking harried but grimly satisfied. "That was too close," he said as he entered the suite. "Richard's moving faster than I anticipated." "He's desperate," Janet observed. "And desperation makes people dangerous." "Exactly why we need to stick to the plan," Marcus said. "The press conference goes ahead, but with enhanced security. I've hired private guards who'll escort us to and from the venue." I raised an eyebrow. "You think Richard would try something in public?" "I think he's already demonstrated he'll use any means necessary to discredit you," Marcus replied, "including manipulating law enforcement. We can't take chances." He was right, of course. The stakes had escalated beyond a simple divorce or even public humiliation. Richard was fighting for his freedom now, his reputation, his very future. If the fraud allegations came to light, he could lose his medical license, face criminal charges, maybe even prison time. What about Vanessa? I asked suddenly. Where does she fit in all this? Is she just Richard's pawn or an active participant? Janet's expression hardened. Miss Sinclair is no one's pawn. She's been Richard's office manager for 3 years, handling all the billing. If there's insurance fraud, she's up to her neck in it. That explained a lot. Why Richard had chosen her, why she seemed so confident about securing my place, why they were so unified in their efforts to silence me. They weren't just lovers. They were co-conspirators. We need to separate them, I said slowly as a plan formed in my mind. Turn them against each other. Marcus looked intrigued. How do you propose to do that? I turned to Janet. The hospital records showing the fraudulent billing. Vanessa's signature is on them, correct? As office manager? Janet nodded. On most of them, yes. Then she's the weak link, I said. She's younger, less established. If she's facing fraud charges, prison time, she might be willing to turn on Richard to save herself, Marcus finished, understanding dawning on his face. It's a classic strategy. Offer the accomplice a deal to testify against the ringleader.
Exactly.
But first, we need to demonstrate to Vanessa that we have the evidence, that we're not bluffing. The press conference, Sophia said suddenly. We all turned to look at her. You show just enough at the press conference to scare her. Make her realize Dad can't protect her. I smiled at my daughter with pride. Precisely. Marcus checked his watch. If we're going to do this, we need to leave in 20 minutes to get set up. I'll need copies of specific documents, I told Janet. Just enough to make our point without revealing everything. As Janet and Marcus huddled over her files, selecting the most strategic records to share, Sophia approached me. Mom, she said quietly, what happens after this? After you expose Dad and Vanessa? What happens to our family? The question hit me like a physical blow. In my determination to fight back, to reclaim my narrative and my dignity, I'd been focused on winning rather than what victory would actually look like. I don't know, I admitted, taking her hands in mine. I can't predict how your father will respond or what the legal consequences will be. But I promise you this, whatever happens, you and I will get through it together. She nodded, her eyes too bright with unshed tears. I just keep thinking about all those family dinners, holidays, vacations. Was it all fake? Was Dad pretending the whole time? No, I said firmly. There were real moments, real love. People are complicated, sweetheart. Your father can be both the man who loved us and the man who betrayed us. Both things can be true. She absorbed this, then straightened her shoulders. I'm ready. Let's go show them what happens when you mess with the Blackwell women. I smiled, recognizing my own resilience reflected in my daughter. Whatever Richard had taken from us, he hadn't broken our spirit. The journey to Marcus's law firm was tense, our small convoy of 2 cars navigating through midday traffic with hypervigilance. I kept expecting to see Richard's Mercedes pull alongside us, or police sirens again, but we arrived without incident. The conference room was already set up for the press conference, a podium at the front, chairs arranged in rows, cameras and microphones from various news outlets being positioned by technicians. Bigger turnout than I expected, Marcus murmured as we surveyed the room from a side entrance. Richard made sure of that with his performance last night, I replied. Everyone loves a public meltdown, especially when it involves the social elite. We retreated to a private office to prepare. Janet spread the selected documents on the desk, just enough evidence to establish the pattern of fraud without revealing our full hand. Remember, Marcus cautioned, we're walking a fine line here. We want to apply pressure without exposing ourselves to legal jeopardy. No direct accusations of criminal behavior, just concerns and questions about discrepancies. I nodded, reviewing my talking points one last time. Then a commotion from the conference room caught our attention. Marcus slipped out to investigate and returned moments later, his expression grim. Richard and Vanessa just arrived, with their own attorney. My heart raced. They're here?
Now.
Apparently Richard decided the best defense is a good offense, Marcus said. He's demanding equal time to respond to your allegations. I peeked through the doorway. Sure enough, Richard stood near the podium, immaculately dressed in a conservative suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, the very picture of distinguished respectability. Beside him, Vanessa wore a demure navy dress, her hair pulled back in a modest chignon, transformation complete from seductress to supportive colleague. Trailing them was a man I recognized with a sinking feeling, Lawrence Feinberg, one of the city's most aggressive litigators, known for his scorched-earth approach to defamation cases. "This changes things," Marcus said quietly. "If Richard is here with Feinberg, he's planning to threaten immediate legal action against anyone who repeats your claims. He's trying to intimidate the press," I realized. "Scare them off from reporting what I say." "It's a standard tactic," Marcus agreed, "and often effective." I thought quickly. Then we need to change tactics too. If Richard wants to confront me directly, let's give him what he wants, but on my terms. A slow smile spread across Marcus's face as I outlined my new approach. "It's risky," he said when I finished, "but it might just work." "What do we do about Feinberg?" Janet asked. "Leave him to me," Marcus replied. "Lawrence and I have history. I know how to handle him." At precisely noon, Marcus stepped up to the podium to begin the press conference. The room fell silent as cameras focused on him. "Good afternoon," he began. "I'm Marcus Harrington, attorney for Elaine Blackwell. As many of you know, Mrs. Blackwell was recently reported deceased, only to reappear very much alive at what was supposed to be the reading of her will. Since then, her husband, Dr. Richard Blackwell, has made public statements suggesting Mrs. Blackwell is suffering from mental health issues. Today, Mrs. Blackwell would like to address these claims directly and share her side of this extraordinary story." He gestured toward the side door, and I stepped out, Sophia at my side, Janet following behind us. A murmur rippled through the assembled reporters at the sight of my daughter with me. This wasn't what they'd expected. As I approached the podium, I caught Richard's eye. For a fleeting moment, his mask slipped, revealing naked fury before he composed himself again. Vanessa, standing slightly behind him, looked pale and uncertain, her gaze darting between me and the folder I carried. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. "Yesterday, my husband told the world that I am experiencing a mental health crisis, that my disappearance and supposed death were the result of paranoid delusions. Today, I'm here to tell you the truth." I paused, letting my gaze sweep the room before continuing. 6 weeks ago, I discovered text messages on my husband's phone discussing my $5 million life insurance policy with his mistress, Vanessa Sinclair. They spoke of starting over with that money. Fearing for my safety, I made the difficult decision to disappear temporarily, to observe what would happen in my absence. Richard started forward, but Feinberg placed a restraining hand on his arm, whispering something urgently in his ear. What I witnessed at my own funeral was Ms. Sinclair celebrating my death, telling my portrait, and I quote, "Finally, she's gone. Now everything is mine." I later found her in my home, wearing my clothes, my jewelry, sleeping in my bed with my husband. Cameras swiveled to capture Vanessa's reaction. She flinched visibly, her composed facade cracking. When I revealed myself at the will reading, my husband's response was not relief that I was alive, but anger that his plans had been thwarted. And yesterday, he attempted to have me involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility using his medical connections, an attempt that was legally blocked. The room erupted with questions. I held up my hand for silence. I'm not finished, because this isn't just about a marital betrayal. This is about a pattern of behavior that extends far beyond my marriage. I gestured to Janet, who stepped forward. "This is Janet Phillips, who worked as my husband's nurse for 5 years. She left his practice after experiencing harassment and intimidation when she rejected his advances. And she isn't the only one." Janet spoke briefly, her voice clear and steady as she recounted her experience. When she finished, I continued, "But perhaps most troubling are these." I opened the folder and held up several documents. Hospital records showing procedures billed, but never performed. Dates when my husband claimed to be at medical conferences but was actually in New York. Signatures from both Dr. Blackwell and Ms. Sinclair on insurance claims that raise serious questions about billing practices at their medical office. The room exploded again with shouted questions. In the chaos, I saw Vanessa grab Richard's arm, her face contorted with panic. He shook her off roughly, his attention fixed on me with undisguised hatred. Feinberg pushed his way to the front of the room. "This is outrageous," he shouted over the din. "My client categorically denies these defamatory accusations. Mrs. Blackwell's mental state is clearly..." Mrs. Blackwell's mental state has been evaluated this morning by 2 independent psychiatrists, Marcus interrupted smoothly, producing documents of his own. Both found her to be of sound mind and under no delusions whatsoever. We have their signed affidavits here. That silenced Feinberg momentarily. He hadn't expected us to be so thoroughly prepared. Taking advantage of the momentary lull, I spoke again. "I am not mentally ill. I am not delusional. I am a woman who discovered her husband's betrayal and took extraordinary steps to protect herself. And now, I have a direct message for my husband and Miss Sinclair." I looked straight at them, dropping all pretense of addressing the press. "Richard, Vanessa, this is your opportunity to come clean. To admit what you've done and face the consequences with dignity. Because if you continue to attack me, to try to discredit me, to paint me as unstable or incompetent, I will release everything I have to the proper authorities. Every text message, every falsified record, every testimony from every woman you've harassed, Richard." The silence in the room was absolute. All eyes were on Richard and Vanessa, waiting for their response. Richard recovered first, his doctor's training allowing him to project calm authority even as his world crumbled around him. "My wife is clearly unwell," he said, his voice carrying easily through the room. "These fabricated documents and coached testimonies are symptoms of her condition. I still want only what's best for Elaine, which is why I've sought professional help on her behalf." It was a masterful performance. If I had known better, I might have believed his concerned expression myself. But then Vanessa stepped forward, her face ashen. "Richard," she said, her voice trembling, "we should talk privately before we say anything more." The flash of annoyance that crossed his face was brief, but unmistakable. "Not now, Vanessa." "Yes, now," she insisted, grabbing his sleeve. "Please." Their hushed argument was clearly visible to everyone in the room, a crack in their united front that widened with each urgent whisper. I exchanged glances with Marcus. Our strategy was working. Vanessa was rattled, recognizing her vulnerability while Richard remained arrogantly confident in his ability to talk his way out of anything. Finally, Richard turned back to the assembled press. "My colleague is understandably distressed by these false accusations. We'll be making no further statements at this time, on the advice of counsel." He began moving toward the exit, Feinberg clearing a path through the reporters. But Vanessa hesitated, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Fear, certainly, but also something else. Calculation, perhaps. Self-preservation. As they left, the press erupted with questions again. I answered a few carefully, then concluded the conference with a simple statement. I am not the villain in this story. I am not crazy or delusional. I am a woman who refused to be a victim. And I will continue to fight for the truth, no matter how powerful those who oppose me might be. Back in the private office, Marcus was jubilant. That couldn't have gone better if we'd scripted it. Did you see Vanessa's face when you mentioned the billing records? She looked like she was going to faint again. And Richard's dismissal of her concerns, Janet added. That was telling. He's already starting to sacrifice her to save himself. I sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the press conference was fading, leaving me drained. What happens now? Now we wait, Marcus said. The ball is in their court. Either they'll try to discredit you again or... My phone rang, an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Hello. Mrs. Blackwell. Vanessa's voice was tight with tension. We need to talk. I put the phone on speaker, so everyone could hear. I think we said everything that needs saying at the press conference. Not everything, she replied. I have information you need. Information about Richard that you don't know yet. I exchanged glances with Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. What kind of information? Not over the phone, she said. Meet me in person. Alone. Warning bells rang in my mind. That's not going to happen, Vanessa. Not after what you and Richard have already tried. There was a pause, then she said, Fine. Bring your lawyer if you must. But no police, no press. Just us. When and where? 1 hour. The botanical garden in the north greenhouse. It's closed for renovations. We won't be disturbed. I considered the suggestion. A public place, but private enough for a conversation. During daylight hours. It could be a trap, but it could also be exactly what we needed. Vanessa turning on Richard to save herself. I'll be there, I said. With my lawyer and my own security. If this is a trick. It's not, she cut me off. 1 hour. Come alone or don't come. This is your only chance to hear what I know. She hung up before I could respond. It's a trap, Sophia said immediately. Dad's putting her up to this. Maybe, I agreed. Or maybe she's realized Richard will throw her under the bus to save himself. Either way, I need to go. It's risky, Marcus cautioned, but potentially valuable. If Vanessa is willing to turn on Richard, her testimony would be damning. Janet looked skeptical. I wouldn't trust her. She's been complicit in Richard's schemes for years. Which is exactly why her testimony would be so powerful, I pointed out. She knows where all the bodies are buried, so to speak. In the end, we agreed that Marcus and I would meet Vanessa with 2 private security guards stationed nearby, but out of sight. Sophia would stay at the law firm with Janet, safe from whatever might unfold. Be careful, Sophia said as she hugged me goodbye. I just got you back. I can't lose you again. You won't, I promised, hoping it was a promise I could keep. The botanical garden was eerily quiet when we arrived, the north greenhouse cordoned off with renovation signs, just as Vanessa had said. Marcus and I approached cautiously, the security guards positioning themselves discreetly near the exits. Through the glass walls, I could see Vanessa already waiting inside, sitting alone on a bench surrounded by tropical plants. She changed from her navy dress to jeans and a simple blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, more vulnerable. Remember, Marcus murmured as we entered, whatever she offers, we make no promises without documentation. We need proof, not just her word. I nodded, my eyes fixed on Vanessa as we approached. She looked up, tension visible in every line of her body. You came, she said, sounding almost surprised. I'm here, I replied coolly. Now what's this information you claim to have? She glanced at Marcus, then back to me. I didn't expect you to bring your attack dog. After what you and Richard have put me through, you're lucky I didn't bring the police. Vanessa sighed, pushing her hair back with a trembling hand. Fair enough. Look, I know you have no reason to trust me. None whatsoever, I agreed. But things have changed since the press conference. She reached for her purse and Marcus tensed beside me, but she only withdrew a phone. Richard called me after we left. Listen. She pressed play on a recorded conversation. You looked weak in there, Richard's voice cold and dismissive. Pulling me aside like that. Richard, she has the billing records. Do you understand what that means for us? Vanessa panicked.
For you, maybe.
My signature isn't on most of those forms. What are you saying? A harsh laugh. Come on, Vanessa. You're the office manager. You handle the billing. If there are irregularities, that's your department. You instructed me to bill those procedures. You dictated which codes to use. Prove it. It's your word against mine. Who do you think they'll believe? A respected surgeon with 30 years experience or his secretary who happens to be sleeping with him? The recording ended. Vanessa's eyes were bright with unshed tears and something else, rage. He's setting me up, she said quietly, making me the scapegoat. And that's not all. She played a second recording, this one from later in the same conversation. We need to stick together on this, Richard. We're in it together. Are we? Because from where I stand, You're a liability. Elaine saw you at the funeral gloating about her death. You wore her clothes, her jewelry. You're the one who looks guilty here. You wanted me to do those things. You gave me her jewelry. I exchanged glances with Marcus. It was a tempting offer. Vanessa's evidence would be the final nail in Richard's coffin. But could we trust her? How do we know you have what you claim? Marcus asked. She reached into her purse again and pulled out a thumb drive. Sample files. Enough to prove I'm not bluffing, not enough to give away everything. Insurance. Marcus took the drive, his expression carefully neutral. We'll need to verify this. Of course, she agreed. But don't take too long. Richard's already laying groundwork to discredit me. He'll claim I was a disgruntled employee, a spurned lover, mentally unstable. Sound familiar? The parallel to how he'd treated me wasn't lost on me. It was Richard's playbook. When someone threatened him, destroy their credibility. Why did you come to us instead of going directly to the authorities? I asked suddenly. Vanessa met my gaze steadily. Because you understand what he is, what he's capable of. The police, the prosecutors, they see a respected doctor, a pillar of the community. They won't believe what I tell them without corroboration. But with you backing me up, with your evidence combined with mine, we create a pattern. I finished. A history of behavior that can't be dismissed. Exactly. There was logic to her argument, but something still bothered me. At the funeral, I said, when you told my portrait that everything was yours now, was that part of Richard's script too? A flush spread across her cheeks. No, she admitted. That was me. My own arrogance, my own cruelty. She looked down at her hands. I was playing a role I thought Richard wanted me to play. The triumphant mistress, taking the wife's place. It was ugly. I'm not proud of it. Her candor surprised me. I'd expected excuses, deflection, not this raw acknowledgement. And my jewelry? I pressed. My clothes? Richard gave them to me. Said you wouldn't need them anymore. She met my eyes again. I should have questioned why. I should have wondered why he was so certain you were never coming back. But I didn't want to know. I didn't want to see. The greenhouse was silent except for the soft drip of water from the irrigation system. I studied the woman beside me. Younger than me, yes, but not so young that she couldn't have known better. Not so naive that she couldn't have recognized the wrongness of what was happening. Yet I also saw myself in her. The woman who had ignored signs, who had chosen not to see, who had compromised her own integrity bit by bit. If we do this, I said finally, there's no turning back. No reconciliation with Richard, no last-minute deal with him behind our backs. There's nothing to reconcile, she said bitterly. He's made that clear. My options now are to go down with him or save myself. I'm choosing the latter. Marcus cleared his throat. We'll need to discuss this privately, Mrs. Blackwell. I nodded and stood. Wait here, Miss Sinclair. We'll be right back. We moved a short distance away, speaking in hushed tones. What do you think? I asked him. The recordings seem genuine, Marcus said. And her story aligns with what we already know about Richard's pattern of behavior. But we're talking about making a deal with someone who is willing to step into my life over my dead body. I finished.
Exactly.
Can we trust her not to double-cross us if Richard offers her a better deal? I considered this. She's frightened and angry. Those are powerful motivators. So is self-preservation, Marcus pointed out. If Richard convinces her he can protect her after all, an idea struck me. What if we don't have to trust her? What if we use her information but protect ourselves at the same time? Marcus raised an eyebrow.
I'm listening.
We agree to help her negotiate with authorities, but we make it clear that our assistance is conditional on full disclosure and continued cooperation. If she withholds anything or tries to back out, the deal is off. And we ensure that any agreement she makes with prosecutors includes a provision that she cannot later recant her testimony about Richard, Marcus added, warming to the idea.
Exactly.
She'd be legally bound to stick to her story. Marcus nodded slowly. It could work, and her evidence would be invaluable. We returned to where Vanessa waited, her posture tense with anticipation. "We're willing to work with you," I told her, "under certain conditions." She nodded cautiously. "Name them." I laid out our terms. Full disclosure, continued cooperation, no contact with Richard, a legally binding agreement with prosecutors that would prevent her from changing her story later. And one more thing, I added. A public apology. For what you said at my funeral. For taking my things. For your role in all of this. She flinched slightly, but nodded. Agreed. "There's still one thing I don't understand," I said.
Why now?
"Why not come to us before the press conference?" Vanessa's expression darkened. "Because until today, I still believed Richard would protect me. That we were in this together." She shook her head ruefully. "I was a fool." "No," I said quietly. "You were manipulated by a master. Just like I was. Just like Janet. Just like all the others." She looked up, surprised by what might have sounded like sympathy. "You don't hate me?" "Oh, I hate what you did," I assured her. "I hate that you celebrated my supposed death, wore my clothes, slept in my bed. I hate that you helped Richard defraud patients and insurance companies. But hate you?" I shook my head. "You're not worth the energy. You're just another of Richard's victims who became a perpetrator." Her face crumpled slightly at my assessment, more cutting perhaps than outright hatred would have been. "What happens now?" she asked, composing herself again. "Marcus took over, all business. First, we verify what's on this drive. If it checks out, we set up a meeting with the state medical board investigators and the district attorney's office. You'll need your own attorney, not Feinberg, obviously. Someone with experience in white-collar crime and plea bargaining." "I can't afford a high-powered lawyer," she protested. "Consider it an investment in your future freedom," I said coolly. "Sell some of those designer purses Richard bought you." She flushed but nodded. "Fair enough." As we prepared to leave, Vanessa caught my arm.
Elaine.
"There's something else you should know. Something personal." I tensed. "What?" "Richard." She hesitated. "He's been seeing someone else. Besides me." For a moment, I was too stunned to respond. Then a laugh bubbled up, surprising all of us. "Of course he has. Richard can never have just one affair, can he? Who is it this time? Another nurse? A patient?" Vanessa shook her head, her expression grave. "Your sister." The world tilted beneath my feet. "Claire?"
No.
"That's not possible. I found texts on his phone 3 weeks ago. They've been meeting for months." She pulled out her phone again, scrolling to find something. I took screenshots. I was jealous. She handed me the phone. There they were, messages between Richard and Claire. Intimate. Unmistakable. My sister and my husband. "She came to the funeral," I whispered, memories rearranging themselves in my mind. "She wept for me." "A good performance," Vanessa said, not unkindly. "Almost as good as Richard's." The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Claire, my only sister, my childhood confidant, the person who had hugged me at the will reading, seemingly overjoyed that I was alive. When the police came to her house this morning, I said numbly, "She called to warn me." Why would she do that if she was with Richard? Vanessa shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe she has limits he doesn't. Maybe she still cares for you in her way. Or maybe it was part of a more complex deception." My mind raced with new possibilities, new dangers. If Claire was working with Richard, what else didn't I know? Who else might be involved? "Thank you for telling me," I said finally, handing back her phone. "I'm not doing it to be kind," she said bluntly. "I'm doing it so you understand what you're dealing with. Richard has his hooks in more people than you realize. People close to you. People you trust." As Marcus and I left the greenhouse, my world felt even more unstable than before. Richard's betrayal had metastasized, spreading to family, to friendships, to the very foundations of my life. "Are you all right?" Marcus asked as we walked back to the car. "No," I admitted, "but I will be, once this is finished." Back at the law firm, Sophia rushed to me as soon as we entered. "What happened?" What did she want? I hesitated, looking at her young face, already so burdened with adult concerns. How much more should I add? Vanessa is turning on your father, I said carefully. She has evidence of his wrongdoing that she's willing to share. In exchange for what? Our help in negotiating with authorities. Reduced charges for her cooperation. Sophia processed this. Do you trust her? No, I said honestly. But her information could be valuable. We'll verify it before taking any action. I didn't mention Claire. That revelation was too fresh, too painful to share yet. Especially since Claire was Sophia's aunt, someone she loved and trusted. Janet approached, her expression worried. While you were gone, Richard called a press conference of his own. It's starting in 30 minutes at the hospital. Marcus and I exchanged alarmed glances. So soon? He's moving fast. We need to see what he says. I decided. Janet, is there a conference room with a television we can use? She nodded, leading us to a spacious room with a large screen on one wall. We gathered around as she tuned to a local news channel already showing preparations for Richard's press conference. The hospital auditorium was filling with reporters and medical staff. A podium displayed the hospital's prestigious logo. Richard was creating a backdrop of institutional credibility, the respected doctor in his professional environment, surrounded by colleagues who would lend tacit support to whatever he said. He's good, Marcus murmured. I'll give him that. At precisely 3 p.m., Richard appeared, walking confidently to the podium. He wore his white coat over his suit, a stethoscope around his neck, full doctor regalia. Behind him stood several other physicians and hospital administrators, a united front of medical authority. Thank you all for coming, Richard began, his voice grave yet steady. I speak to you today not just as a husband concerned for his wife's well-being, but as a physician committed to truth and ethical practice. He paused, his expression one of compassionate concern. Earlier today, my wife Elaine made serious allegations against me and my colleague Vanessa Sinclair. Allegations that are not only false, but symptomatic of a condition that requires understanding and professional help, not public spectacle. I gripped the edge of the table, fury building as he continued. For those unfamiliar with psychiatric conditions, paranoid ideation often includes beliefs that loved ones are conspiring against the patient. These delusions can be extremely detailed and, to the patient, entirely convincing. This is what we're seeing with my wife's claims about life insurance plots and billing fraud. Behind me, Sophia made a small, angry sound.
He's doing it again.
Making you sound crazy. Richard gestured to an older man who stood nearby. Dr. Harold Matheson, Chief of Psychiatry here at Manhattan Memorial, has reviewed the situation and can speak to the clinical presentation we're observing. Dr. Matheson stepped forward, silver-haired, distinguished, radiating authority. Without having examined Mrs. Blackwell directly, I cannot make a definitive diagnosis. However, the behavior pattern described, disappearance, elaborate deception, paranoid ideation, grandiose beliefs about uncovering conspiracies, is consistent with several serious psychiatric conditions that warrant immediate evaluation and treatment. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. They were building their case methodically, cloaking character assassination in medical terminology. Richard returned to the microphone. As for the allegations regarding hospital billing, I want to be absolutely clear. All procedures at our practice are properly documented and legitimately billed. Our records are regularly audited and have consistently met or exceeded compliance standards. He paused, his expression hardening slightly. The documents my wife displayed at her press conference were altered or fabricated. We believe this was done by Janet Phillips, a former employee who was terminated for incompetence and has harbored resentment ever since. Janet gasped beside me. That lying bastard. I was never incompetent. My performance reviews were excellent until I rejected him. Richard continued smoothly. Miss Phillips has apparently convinced my wife of various conspiracies as part of some misguided revenge scheme. We're considering legal action against Miss Phillips for defamation and document falsification. He's trying to discredit all your witnesses one by one, Marcus observed grimly. As for Vanessa Sinclair, Richard went on, she has been a valued colleague whose professional support during my wife's disappearance has been misconstrued by a troubled mind. Ms. Sinclair has never been my mistress, has never worn my wife's clothes or jewelry, and was present at the funeral out of professional respect. Nothing more. I laughed bitterly. He's denying everything outright. Bold strategy. It's his word against ours, Marcus said. Unless Vanessa's evidence proves solid. Richard's voice softened, becoming almost tender. To my wife, Elaine. If you're watching this, please know that I still love you. I understand that you're not thinking clearly right now, that you believe these things are true. I'm not angry. I'm worried. Please come home. Let me help you get the care you need. The performance was masterful. The concerned husband, the compassionate doctor, reaching out to his troubled wife. If I had known better, even I might have been swayed. And to those who would exploit my wife's condition for publicity or profit, Richard's voice hardened again. Be warned, I will use every legal means at my disposal to protect her from manipulation and to defend my professional reputation against slander. With that thinly veiled threat, he stepped back from the podium. The assembled doctors and administrators applauded supportively as he left the stage, ignoring shouted questions from reporters. The television anchor reappeared, summarizing the dueling press conferences and the extraordinary situation. A prominent surgeon's wife who had faked her own death now accusing him of plotting to kill her, while he claimed she was suffering from delusions. It's reality TV for the Manhattan elite, the anchor quipped glibly. Stay tuned as this real-life soap opera continues to unfold. I switched off the television in disgust. He's painting himself as the victim, the loving husband concerned about his mentally ill wife. And it's working, Marcus said grimly. The medical credentials lend him tremendous credibility. Sophia paced the room, agitated. How can he just lie like that? About everything? About Mom, about Vanessa, about the fraud. All of it. Because he believes he can get away with it, I replied. He always has before. Janet shook her head. He's desperate. Throwing me under the bus, denying the affair with Vanessa. These are panic moves. He knows if Vanessa turns on him with evidence, he's finished. Which means our next steps are crucial, Marcus said. We need to verify Vanessa's information immediately. And we need to prepare for Richard's next move, which will likely be a legal attempt to have Elaine declared incompetent. My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number again, but this time I knew who it was before I even looked. Another threat from Richard. But when I checked the message, my blood ran cold. It wasn't from Richard at all. I warned you, it read. I told you at the funeral that if I couldn't bury you once, I'd bury you myself. You have until midnight to withdraw your allegations and check yourself into a mental health facility. After that, Sophia pays the price. Attached was a photo of my daughter. Not the Sophia standing in the room with us, but a Sophia clearly photographed through a telephoto lens earlier that day as she entered Marcus's office building. Mom, Sophia asked, noticing my expression. What is it? I showed the message to Marcus first, keeping it from Sophia's view. His face darkened as he read it. We need security for Sophia, he said quietly.
Now.
What's happening? Sophia demanded. I made a split-second decision. Your father is escalating his threats. I'm concerned he might try to separate us, perhaps by seeking emergency custody on grounds that I'm an unfit parent. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Richard was indeed threatening Sophia, just more directly than I was letting on. He can't do that, Sophia protested.
I'm 20.
I'm an adult. Legally, yes, Marcus agreed, catching on to my approach. But he might try to claim you're being manipulated or endangered by your mother's delusions. It's thin, but with his medical authority. Sophia's face hardened with determination. Let him try. I'll tell any judge exactly what I've seen and heard. Nevertheless, I said firmly, I want you to stay with Marcus's security team for now. No going anywhere alone. Not even to the bathroom in this building. She started to protest, then saw something in my expression that stopped her. It's worse than you're saying, isn't it? I hesitated, then nodded. Your father is cornered. That makes him dangerous in ways we can't fully predict. As Marcus arranged for additional security, I stared at the threatening text again.
The wording bothered me.
I warned you at the funeral. That didn't sound like Richard. It sounded like Vanessa. But Vanessa had just given us evidence against Richard. Why would she be threatening my daughter now? Unless it was all an elaborate setup. The falling out with Richard, the evidence on the thumb drive, the tearful confession, all designed to gain my trust while setting a trap. I showed the text to Janet, who had known Vanessa professionally for years. Does this sound like her? Janet read it carefully. The wording, yes. The threat against Sophia? She hesitated. I wouldn't have thought so, but then I never thought she'd sleep with Richard either. We need to check that thumb drive immediately, I decided. If it's genuine, Vanessa is probably not behind this text. If it's fake or contains malware. Marcus returned, having arranged for 2 security professionals to remain with Sophia at all times. My tech team is analyzing the drive now. They're being cautious, checking for viruses, keyloggers, anything suspicious before opening the actual files.
Good, I said.
And I want the phone number that sent this text traced. Already on it, Marcus assured me. Though if it's a burner phone, we may not learn much. As we waited for results, I felt the walls closing in again. Richard on one side with his medical authority and institutional support. Possibly Vanessa on another with her threats and schemes. My own sister Claire somewhere in the mix, her loyalties unclear. And now a direct threat to my daughter. I had started this to expose a betrayal and reclaim my dignity, but the stakes had escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. Now I wasn't just fighting for my reputation or even my freedom, I was fighting for my daughter's safety. And I would do whatever it took to protect her, even if it meant burning every bridge, exposing every secret, and destroying every person who stood in my way, including my husband, including my sister, including myself, because some things are worth any price. And Sophia was one of them. And the third, it's me. I don't know what game you're playing, but if you think you can switch sides now, you're mistaken. Remember, I have the recordings of our conversations about Elaine, about the plan. Don't make me use them. The message cut off, leaving a deafening silence in the apartment. Sophia stared at the phone, then at me, her face pale with shock. "Mom," she whispered. "What plan? What was Dad talking about?" I had no answer. My mind was spinning, trying to process this new revelation. Claire hadn't just been having an affair with Richard. She'd been actively involved in whatever he'd been planning for me. Marcus moved swiftly to my side. "We need to go."
Now.
As if on cue, his phone rang. He answered, listened briefly, then cursed under his breath. Change of plans. The lobby security camera just picked up Claire entering the building. She's on her way up. My sister was coming here.
Now.
After everything I'd just learned. "Let's go," I said, grabbing Sophia's arm. "We can use the service stairs." "Wait," Sophia pulled back. "I want to hear what she has to say. Don't you want answers?" I hesitated. Part of me desperately wanted to confront Claire, to hear from her own lips how she could betray me so completely. But another part, the part that had learned caution these past weeks, recognized the danger. "It's not safe," Marcus insisted. "This could be a setup." The security guard by the door spoke urgently into his earpiece, then turned to us. "Main elevator is on its way up, stopping at every floor. Someone's trying to slow it down." That decided it. "Backstairs," I ordered.
Now.
We moved quickly toward the rear of the apartment where a door led to the service stairwell. The security guard opened it cautiously, checked the stairs, then nodded.
Clear.
We filed through, Marcus and one guard taking the lead, Sophia and I in the middle, the other guards bringing up the rear. We descended quickly, our footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell. 2 floors down, a door above us opened and closed. Footsteps followed, moving quickly. "Faster," Marcus muttered. We picked up the pace, practically running down the stairs now. 8 floors to go. 7. 6. The footsteps above grew louder. Whoever was following us was gaining ground. "Elaine!" A voice called down the stairwell. Claire's voice. Elaine, wait. Please. I faltered, instinctively responding to my sister's call before Marcus grabbed my arm. Don't stop, he hissed. We continued downward. 5th floor.
4th.
The footsteps behind us were closer now. Elaine, please. It's not what you think. I can explain. The desperation in her voice almost made me turn. Claire and I had been close once, inseparable as children, confidants as adults. Or so I'd thought. Keep moving, Marcus urged as we reached the 3rd floor. Suddenly, the door 2 floors below us burst open. A man entered the stairwell, looking up at us. Even from a distance, I recognized him immediately. Lawrence Feinberg, Richard's attorney. Stop right there, he called up. Mrs. Blackwell, I have court papers to serve you. We were trapped, Claire pursuing from above, Feinberg blocking our path below. The security guards reacted instantly. One drew a weapon, aiming down the stairwell at Feinberg. Back away, sir.
Now.
Feinberg raised his hands, but didn't retreat. I'm an officer of the court serving legal documents. Interfering would be a crime. So, is harassment, the guard replied coolly. Back away, or I will consider you a threat. While this standoff unfolded below, Claire had nearly reached us. She appeared around the bend in the stairs, breathless, her face flushed. Elaine, she gasped. Thank God. You have to listen to me. The second guard positioned himself between us. Stay where you are, ma'am. Claire ignored him, her eyes fixed on me. It's not what you think. I wasn't helping Richard. I was trying to protect you. By sleeping with my husband? The words burst from me before I could stop them. She flinched as if struck. Is that what he told you? What Vanessa told you? She shook her head vehemently. It's not true. Richard and I never. I found the earrings, Claire. I cut her off. In my desk. For Claire. All my love are. Don't lie to me. Not anymore. Confusion crossed her face. Earrings? I don't know anything about earrings. Then, understanding dawned. Oh God, Elaine, he's setting me up. Just like he's setting up Vanessa. Below us, the standoff with Feinberg continued. Above, who knew if more of Richard's allies were on their way? We needed to move. We don't have time for this, Marcus said urgently. Mrs. Blackwell, we need to get you and Sophia out of here. But I couldn't tear myself away from my sister's face, searching for the truth in her expression. Claire had been my rock through so many crises, our parents' deaths, my miscarriages, even the early rough patches in my marriage. Could she really have betrayed me so completely? 1 minute, I told Marcus. Then to Claire. Explain. Quickly. She nodded, speaking rapidly. After you disappeared, Richard was beside himself, not with grief, but with rage. He suspected you were alive, hiding somewhere. He kept calling me, asking if I'd heard from you, if I knew where you might go. And did you? I demanded.
No.
I thought you were dead, Elaine. We all did. She swallowed hard. But Richard was obsessed with finding you. He started coming over to my house, going through your old things I'd kept, looking for clues. Then he started implying things. What things? That if I helped him find you, there would be rewards, financial support, a place in his life. Her expression twisted with disgust. I played along, Elaine. I let him think I was on his side so I could figure out what he was planning. Those messages you heard, I was recording everything, building evidence. It sounded plausible. Or was that just what I wanted to believe? That my sister hadn't betrayed me after all? The police at your door this morning, I said. You called to warn me. She nodded eagerly. Of course I did. I've been trying to protect you all along. Then why didn't you come to me after the will reading? Why maintain contact with Richard at all? Because I needed proof, she exclaimed. Your word against his wasn't enough. I saw how he was painting you as unstable. I needed hard evidence of what he was planning. Marcus interrupted urgently. Mrs. Blackwell, we need to move.
Now.
Feinberg was still blocking the stairs below, but now he was on his phone, likely calling for reinforcements. We were running out of time. If you're telling the truth, I said to Claire, Come with us now. Bring whatever evidence you have. Help us stop Richard. She hesitated only briefly before nodding. My phone. It's all on my phone. Recordings, texts, everything. Mom. Sophia interjected. What if it's a trick? A valid concern. But looking into my sister's eyes, I saw something I recognized. The same determination, the same fire that had driven me to fake my own death to uncover the truth. It's a risk I'm willing to take, I decided. Claire comes with us. Marcus didn't look happy, but nodded tersely. We still need to get past Feinberg. The guard who had been keeping Feinberg at bay spoke into his earpiece, then turned to us. Backup is in position at the second floor exit. We can create a diversion. Do it, Marcus ordered. What happened next unfolded with military precision. A crash sounded from somewhere below, drawing Feinberg's attention. In that moment of distraction, our guards moved, one rushing down to physically block him while the other hustled us toward the second floor exit. We burst through the door into a service corridor, where 2 more security personnel waited. Together, we moved swiftly through the building's back passages, emerging finally into an alley where an unmarked van idled. Get in, Marcus directed, practically shoving us into the vehicle. As we pulled away, I saw Feinberg emerge from the building, papers in hand, frustration evident on his face as our van disappeared around the corner. Inside the vehicle, tension crackled between Claire and me. Sophia sat between us, her expression guarded as she watched her aunt warily. Let me see your phone, I said to Claire. She handed it over without hesitation. The passcode is 0517, your birthday. I unlocked the phone and found a folder labeled simply R. Inside were dozens of recordings, text messages, and notes, all meticulously organized and dated. I clicked on the most recent recording, made just yesterday after Richard's television appearance. Richard's voice filled the van. Claire, I need you to do something for me. Elaine trusts you. Get her alone. Convince her to check herself in for evaluation. Tell her it's for Sophia's sake. Claire's response. And if she refuses? Then we move to Plan B. The court order is ready. Feinberg will serve it tomorrow. She'll fight it, Richard. You know she will. A chilling laugh. Let her try. I've got 3 psychiatric colleagues ready to testify that her behavior meets criteria for involuntary commitment. By the time she gets a hearing, it'll be too late. I stopped the recording, my hands shaking. Claire hadn't been lying. She really had been gathering evidence against Richard. There's more, she said quietly. Much more. He's been planning this for months, Elaine. The life insurance policy was just the beginning. Why didn't you come to me sooner? I asked, the hurt still raw despite my relief at her innocence. I tried. When you first disappeared, I was frantic. Then at the funeral, I thought I saw someone who looked like you in the back, but I convinced myself it was grief playing tricks on my mind. After the will reading, when you reappeared, Richard never left my side. He was watching me, Elaine, monitoring my calls, following me. The earrings, I said, still puzzled. In my desk. Claire shook her head. Plant. He must have put them there knowing you'd find them. Probably after I refused his advances. It's classic Richard. When someone won't play along, he manufactures evidence to discredit them. The pieces were falling into place. Richard hadn't just been targeting me. He'd been systematically isolating me, turning those closest to me into either accomplices or suspected betrayers. What about Vanessa? Sophia asked. Is she really turning against Dad, or is that part of his plan too? Claire looked troubled. I don't know. She and Richard seemed genuinely at odds after your press conference, but with those two, she shrugged. They're both masterful manipulators. Marcus, who had been on the phone coordinating with his team, rejoined the conversation. Feinberg was trying to serve commitment papers. A judge signed an emergency order for psychiatric evaluation an hour ago. Richard's moving fast. Based on what grounds? I demanded. The usual, danger to self or others, inability to care for oneself due to mental illness. All supported by affidavits from Richard's psychiatric colleagues. Claire nodded grimly. That matches what he told me. He's been laying groundwork for this for weeks, gathering statements from doctors who've never even met you, but are willing to sign whatever he puts in front of them. Professional courtesy, I said bitterly. The old boys network at its finest. So, what do we do now? Sophia asked, the reality of our situation clearly sinking in. Keep running. Marcus shook his head. Running makes you look guilty, or, in this case, unstable. We need to confront this head-on.
How? I asked.
Richard has the medical establishment behind him, a judge has already signed commitment papers, and the media is painting me as either a vindictive wife or a psychiatric case. By changing the narrative completely, Marcus replied. Right now, it's your word against Richard's. But with Claire's evidence, plus Vanessa's documents, plus Janet's testimony, we create a pattern too compelling to ignore. We need more than a pattern, I said slowly, an idea forming. We need Richard to incriminate himself directly. Claire caught on immediately. A trap. Get him to admit what he's done on record. Exactly, I agreed. But he's too careful for a simple recording. We need something more dramatic. Like what? Sophia asked. I looked at my daughter, my sister, my lawyer, the people risking everything to help me fight back against Richard's machinations. They deserved honesty. Like me disappearing again, I said. But this time, with witnesses to what really happens. The van fell silent as they absorbed my suggestion. Marcus was the first to speak, his voice cautious. You're suggesting using yourself as bait. I'm suggesting we give Richard exactly what he wants, a chance to get rid of me once and for all. Only this time, we'll be prepared. No, Sophia said flatly. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. It's the only way, I insisted. Richard won't stop. Even if we discredit him temporarily with the evidence we have, he'll find another angle, another approach. He's too invested in his narrative now, too committed to his plan. Your daughter's right, Marcus said. The risk is unacceptable. Claire studied me thoughtfully. Unless we control every variable, every person involved, every location. She turned to Marcus. You have connections in law enforcement, right? People you trust absolutely? He nodded reluctantly. A few. And surveillance equipment? The ability to monitor and record from multiple angles. Yes, but then it could work, Claire interrupted. If we create a controlled environment, make Richard believe he is Elaine isolated and vulnerable, while in reality, we have witnesses to everything, I finished. Irrefutable evidence of his true intentions. Marcus still looked unconvinced. Even in a controlled environment, there are too many unknowns. Richard could bring others we don't know about. He could change the plan at the last minute. Then we need leverage, I said. Something to ensure he comes alone, follows our script. Claire's eyes lit up. The hospital records. The fraud evidence. We let him know we're prepared to release everything to the authorities immediately unless he meets with you privately to negotiate. It could work. Richard's greatest fear wasn't exposure as an adulterer. It was losing his medical license, facing fraud charges, potential prison time. He'd risk a private meeting if he thought he could contain the damage. I don't like it, Sophia said, her voice small. What if something goes wrong? I took her hand. Nothing will go wrong because we'll plan for every contingency. And because your aunt, Marcus, and his team will be watching every moment. I squeezed her fingers. Trust me, sweetheart. This is the only way to end this for good. She searched my face, then nodded reluctantly. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise, I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. Because now I wasn't just fighting for my dignity or even my freedom. I was fighting for a future where my daughter wouldn't have to live in fear of her father's manipulations. Marcus sighed heavily. If we're really doing this, we need a secure location. Somewhere we control completely. The lake house, Claire suggested. It's isolated, we know the layout, and Richard would believe Elaine might go there to hide. I nodded slowly. It could work. We'd need time to set up surveillance, coordinate with law enforcement, and deal with the commitment order, Marcus added. You can't execute this plan if you're in a psychiatric facility. So we keep moving, stay ahead of Feinberg and the authorities until we're ready, I said. As the van wound through city streets, putting distance between us and the apartment building, we began to flesh out the plan. It was audacious, risky, but also our best chance at exposing Richard once and for all. By the time we reached Marcus's secure office building, we had the outline of a strategy. Claire would feed Richard information about my supposed emotional deterioration, suggesting I might be hiding at the lake house. Marcus would contact his law enforcement connections to arrange covert surveillance and backup. I would appear to be isolated and vulnerable, perhaps even suicidal, the perfect target for Richard's solution to his Elaine problem. What about Vanessa? I asked as we gathered in Marcus's private conference room. Where does she fit in all this? Claire frowned. That's the wild card. I don't know if she's truly turned against Richard or if they're still working together. The evidence she provided appears genuine, Marcus pointed out. So did the evidence against me, Claire countered. The earrings, the messages. Richard's good at manufacturing proof. A troubling thought occurred to me. The threatening text about Sophia. Could that have been Richard trying to make us suspect Vanessa? To discredit her before she could testify against him? It's possible, Marcus agreed. Divide and conquer is a classic strategy. If you don't trust Vanessa's evidence, you can't use it against him. So we proceed carefully with Vanessa, I decided. Use her information, but don't bring her into the inner circle of our plan. As we continued refining our strategy, a commotion outside the conference room caught our attention. Raised voices, hurried footsteps. Marcus opened the door to investigate and found one of his associates rushing toward us. Turn on the news, the young lawyer said breathlessly.
Now.
Marcus grabbed a remote and switched on the wall-mounted television. Breaking news banners scrolled across the screen. Prominent surgeon's mistress found dead in apparent suicide. The room fell silent as the news anchor's voice filled the space. Vanessa Sinclair, the woman at the center of the Blackwell family drama, was found dead in her apartment approximately 1 hour ago. Police sources say she appears to have taken her own life, leaving behind a note claiming she had fabricated allegations against Dr. Richard Blackwell under pressure from his estranged wife, Elaine Blackwell. The anchor continued. According to sources close to the investigation, the note detailed how Mrs. Blackwell allegedly coerced Ms. Sinclair into providing false evidence of financial fraud and marital infidelity, threatening to ruin her career if she didn't cooperate. My legs gave way, and I sank into a chair, shock washing over me in icy waves. This can't be happening.
Suicide?
Claire echoed incredulously. After everything she told you today? After giving you evidence against Richard? That makes no sense. Unless it wasn't suicide at all. The thought formed with terrible clarity in my mind. Richard had realized Vanessa was a liability, the one person who could corroborate my claims with insider knowledge. And so he had eliminated her, staging her death to look like suicide while simultaneously discrediting both her and me. Richard, I whispered. He did this. The news continued, the anchor's tone grave. Dr. Blackwell, reached at Manhattan Memorial Hospital, expressed shock and sorrow at Ms. Sinclair's death. In a brief statement, he called for prayers for her family and suggested this tragic development underscores the serious nature of his wife's psychological condition and the harm it has caused to innocent parties. Footage played of Richard outside the hospital, his expression a perfect mask of sorrowful concern. This is a terrible tragedy that could have been prevented. Vanessa was a dedicated healthcare professional who became collateral damage in my wife's delusions. I can only hope that Elaine will now get the help she so desperately needs before anyone else is hurt. The calculating coldness of it stole my breath. Richard had not only eliminated Vanessa, but used her death to further his narrative of my supposed instability. It was chillingly efficient and utterly sociopathic. He's framing you for driving her to suicide, Marcus said, his voice tight with anger. Creating a narrative where your delusions led to an innocent woman's death. We need to get ahead of this, Claire insisted. Make a statement. Refute the suicide note. No, I interrupted, a strange calm settling over me. We don't refute anything. Not yet. They all turned to look at me with varying degrees of confusion. Elaine, Marcus began cautiously, if we don't respond to these allegations. Richard thinks he's won, I said. He believes he's eliminated Vanessa as a threat and framed me in the process. He thinks I'll either be arrested for coercion or committed to a psychiatric facility. I straightened in my chair, resolve hardening within me. Let him think that. Let him believe his plan is working perfectly. Understanding dawned on Claire's face. Because when someone thinks they've won, they get careless, I finished. They make mistakes. What are you suggesting? Marcus asked. We accelerate our plan, I replied, but with a twist. Instead of me hiding at the lake house, I turn myself in for psychiatric evaluation.
What?
Sophia exclaimed. Mom, no. I held up a hand to quiet her protests. Hear me out. Richard expects me to run, to fight the commitment order. What if I don't? What if I voluntarily check myself in, playing right into his narrative? You'd be trapped in a psychiatric facility, Marcus pointed out, at the mercy of doctors who may be in Richard's pocket. Not if we choose the facility, I countered. Not if we have allies inside. Claire caught on immediately. Dr. Patterson, your college roommate. She's chief of psychiatry at Westlake Behavioral. I nodded. Margaret would help us. She'd understand what we're trying to do. Even so, Marcus said, voluntarily committing yourself is extremely risky. Once you're inside, Richard will believe he's won, I interrupted. He'll think I've accepted defeat, acknowledged my supposed mental illness. His guard will be down, and that's when we spring the trap.
How?
Sophia demanded, still clearly distressed by the idea. We let him visit me, I explained. Caring husband, concerned about his troubled wife. Only this time, everything will be recorded. Every word, every gesture. And we'll have witnesses, medical professionals not in Richard's pocket, who can testify to my mental competence. It was audacious, risky, but also elegant in its simplicity. Richard would never suspect a trap laid within the very institution he'd tried to use against me. Meanwhile, I continued, Claire continues gathering evidence about Vanessa's death. If Richard did have her killed or pressured her into suicide, there will be traces. Inconsistencies in the timeline. Witnesses who saw someone entering or leaving her apartment. Marcus rubbed his chin thoughtfully. It could work, but the timing would need to be perfect, and we'd need absolute assurance of your safety inside the facility. Margaret will help with that, I said confidently. She's known me for 30 years. She won't let anything happen to me. Claire nodded slowly. And Richard would never suspect you of setting a trap from inside a psychiatric facility. It's the last place he'd expect you to have agency or control. Exactly, I agreed. He thinks of psychiatric patients as helpless, voiceless. It's his blind spot, his arrogance. We spend the next hour refining the plan, identifying potential pitfalls and solutions. By the end, even Sophia had reluctantly come around to the idea, though she insisted on being part of the team monitoring the operation from outside the facility. I still don't like it, she said as we prepared to leave for Westlake Behavioral. But I understand why it might be our best option. I hugged her tightly. It won't be for long, sweetheart. Just long enough to get Richard to incriminate himself. Claire squeezed my shoulder. I'll start investigating Vanessa's death immediately. If Richard is behind it, I'll find proof. As we drove toward Westlake Behavioral, I stared out at the passing city, thoughts swirling. In the space of a few weeks, my life had transformed beyond recognition. I had faked my own death, exposed my husband's affair, discovered his fraudulent business practices, and now faced the possibility that he had committed murder to silence Vanessa. And yet, strangely, I felt stronger than I had in years. The woman who had ignored signs of betrayal, who had compromised her dignity to maintain appearances, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone new. Someone who would fight back with every weapon at her disposal, even if it meant risking everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. Richard had tried to paint me as mentally unstable, and now I was voluntarily entering a psychiatric facility. But unlike his narrative of a woman broken by delusions, I was making a strategic choice. I was reclaiming my agency, my voice, my power. As we pulled up to the discreet entrance of Westlake Behavioral, Marcus turned to me one last time. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Elaine? Once you're inside, your freedom will be limited. Your communications monitored." I nodded, my resolve unwavering. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance, my head held high. Richard thought he had won. He thought he had silenced Vanessa permanently and would soon silence me as well. He was wrong, because while I might be walking into a psychiatric facility, I wasn't walking in as a victim. I was walking in as a hunter, and Richard Blackwell was about to become the prey. Inside, Margaret Patterson was waiting for me, her familiar face lined with concern. We had spoken briefly by phone, and while she didn't know all the details, she understood enough to know I needed her help. "Elaine," she said warmly, embracing me. "I've made all the arrangements as you requested. Private room, limited staff access, complete confidentiality." "Thank you, Margaret," I replied. "I can't tell you how much this means to me." She led me through the admission process, skillfully managing the paperwork to ensure I would be protected during my stay. As we walked to my room, she kept her voice low. "The surveillance equipment is already installed. Audio and video just as you asked. The feed goes directly to an off-site server that only I and your attorney can access. And the staff, handpicked by me personally. No connections to Manhattan Memorial or Richard's social circle. They've been told you're a high-profile patient requiring extra privacy due to media interest. Nothing more." My room was comfortable, more like a hotel suite than a hospital room. Large windows overlooked a peaceful garden, though I noted the reinforced glass, a standard safety feature in such facilities. "We've scheduled Richard's visit for tomorrow afternoon," Margaret informed me. "I spoke with him personally, told him you had checked yourself in, and were asking to see him." He seemed surprised. "I'm sure he was," I said dryly. "Elaine," Margaret said, her professional demeanor softening, "as your doctor and your friend, I have to ask, are you sure about this? Using yourself as bait is extremely risky, psychologically as well as physically." I sat on the edge of the bed, meeting her concerned gaze. "I don't have a choice, Margaret. If I don't stop Richard now, he'll never stop coming after me. He's already framed me for coercing Vanessa. Who knows what he'll do next?" She nodded reluctantly. "I understand. Just promise me you'll be careful tomorrow. Richard may appear charming and controlled, but if he feels cornered, I know exactly what he's capable of," I assured her. "That's why we need to record everything. To show the world the real Richard Blackwell, not the grieving husband he pretends to be." After Margaret left, I paced the room, mentally rehearsing tomorrow's confrontation. I would need to appear vulnerable, defeated, the very image of the broken woman Richard wanted me to be. I would need to draw him out carefully, get him to admit what he'd done without realizing he was being recorded. My phone had been surrendered during admission, standard protocol, but Margaret had smuggled in a secure burner phone that couldn't be traced. I used it now to send a brief message to Marcus. "In position. All set for tomorrow." His reply came seconds later. "Claire found something at Vanessa's apartment. Police missed it. Call when safe." My pulse quickened. Claire had already discovered something the police had overlooked? I moved to the bathroom, turned on the shower to mask any sound, and called Marcus. "What did Claire find?" I asked without preamble. "A hidden camera in Vanessa's apartment," he replied. "Professionally installed, disguised as a smoke detector. Claire recognized it because she has the same system in her own home." "A camera?" I echoed. "So someone was watching Vanessa." "Exactly. And the interesting part? The feed wasn't going to a local receiver. It was being transmitted to an external server. Can we access it?" "Claire's working on that now. If we can see what happened in that apartment in the hours before Vanessa died, we might have proof that her death wasn't suicide," I finished. "That Richard was involved." "Precisely. But Elaine, if Richard did have Vanessa killed, that raises the stakes considerably. He's moved from fraud and manipulation to homicide. You need to be extremely careful tomorrow. I will be, I promised. Margaret has security protocols in place. Richard won't be able to harm me physically. It's not just physical harm I'm worried about, Marcus said grimly. If he realizes you're setting him up, he could simply refuse to incriminate himself. Or worse, he could spin whatever you say to further his narrative of your instability. Then I'll have to be very convincing, I said. Make him believe I'm exactly what he thinks I am, a broken woman at the end of her rope. After ending the call, I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Tomorrow would determine everything. My freedom, my future, possibly even justice for Vanessa. I needed to be perfect. One slip, one false note, and Richard would sense the trap. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of funerals and falling and Vanessa's face, pale and accusing. I woke before dawn, my body tense with anticipation and dread. The day passed slowly. Margaret stopped by several times, ostensibly checking on my condition but really confirming that all was ready for Richard's visit. The surveillance equipment was tested and functional. The room had been swept for any counter-surveillance devices Richard might try to bring. Security personnel were strategically positioned throughout the facility. At precisely 3 o'clock, there was a knock at my door. Margaret entered, her professional mask firmly in place. "Your husband is here to see you, Mrs. Blackwell. Are you feeling up to a visit?" I nodded, arranging my features into an expression of exhausted resignation.
Yes.
"Send him in." She gave me one last searching look, then stepped aside. And there he was, Richard Blackwell, my husband of 23 years, the man who had shared my bed, my home, my life. The man who had betrayed me in every way imaginable and, quite possibly, had Vanessa killed to silence her. He looked immaculate as always, tailored suit, perfectly knotted tie, silver hair expertly styled. But there was something different in his eyes. A gleam of triumph barely concealed behind a mask of concern. "Elaine," he said softly, approaching the bed where I sat. "I came as soon as Dr. Patterson called. How are you feeling?" I kept my gaze downcast, my posture defeated. Tired. Confused. He sat beside me, not touching me but close enough that I could smell his familiar cologne. "That's understandable. You've been through a lot." Margaret spoke from the doorway. "I'll leave you two to talk. Dr. Blackwell, please remember that your wife is still adjusting to her medication. Keep the conversation calm and supportive." He nodded solemnly. "Of course, doctor. Thank you for taking such good care of her." After Margaret left, closing the door behind her, Richard's demeanor subtly shifted. The concerned furrow in his brow smoothed out. His posture relaxed. He was no longer performing for an audience. "I must say," he began conversationally, "this is a surprise. I expected you to fight the commitment order, not check yourself involuntarily." I shrugged listlessly. What was the point of fighting? You won, Richard. You've convinced everyone I'm crazy. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Not everyone, just the people who matter. He studied me curiously. What changed? The last time I saw you, you were giving press conferences, making accusations, threatening to ruin me. This was it, the moment to begin drawing him out. I had to appear broken, but not suspiciously so. Defeated, but still lucid enough to engage. "Vanessa's death," I said quietly. When I saw what they were saying about me, I just couldn't fight anymore." He nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "It was a tragedy. Such a waste." "Did you do it?" I asked, the question blunt, but my tone merely curious, not accusatory. "Did you kill her, Richard?" He stiffened slightly before forcing himself to relax. "What a question, Elaine. Vanessa took her own life. The police confirmed it. The police believe what they're told," I said. "Especially when the person doing the telling is a respected doctor with influential friends." Richard sighed, as if dealing with a difficult child. "This is exactly why you need to be here, Elaine. These paranoid accusations, these conspiracy theories, they're symptoms of your condition." I let my gaze drop to my hands, playing the part of the uncertain patient beginning to doubt her own perceptions. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I have been confused. But the text messages, Richard. The life insurance discussions with Vanessa. Those were real. Were they? He countered smoothly. Or were they what you wanted to see? Innocent conversations twisted by a mind struggling to separate fact from fiction. And the billing fraud? The falsified procedures? Was that in my mind, too? A flash of irritation crossed his face before he masked it. Hospital billing is complex. What might look like discrepancies to a layperson are often just standard coding practices. I needed to push harder, get him to reveal more. Vanessa didn't think so. She had evidence, Richard. Documents, emails, recordings. Evidence she fabricated under pressure from you, he replied without missing a beat. As she admitted in her suicide note. A note I never saw, I pointed out. A note that conveniently absolves you of everything. Richard stood and walked to the window, his back to me. I didn't come here to argue, Elaine. I came because Dr. Patterson said you wanted to see me. Time to change tactics. I softened my voice, injected a note of desperation. I need to understand, Richard. After 23 years, don't I deserve that much? If I'm going to accept that my perceptions were wrong, that I've been ill, I need to make sense of what happened. He turned back to me, studying my face for signs of deception. Finding none. I'd always been a better actress than he gave me credit for. He returned to sit beside me. What do you want to understand? He asked cautiously. When did it start? The affair with Vanessa. The plan to get rid of me. I let my voice break slightly on the last words. Richard was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and controlled. There was no plan to get rid of you, Elaine. That was your delusion. Then why discuss my life insurance policy with Vanessa? Why track my running routes, my swimming habits at the lake house? His expression hardened. You were spying on us. Reading private messages. So you don't deny having those conversations, I pressed. I deny your interpretation of them, he countered. Yes, Vanessa, and I discussed your life insurance in the context of overall estate planning. Yes, I was aware of your exercise habits, as any husband would be. You've twisted innocent conversations into something sinister. I let tears fill my eyes. Not entirely feigned. The calm way he lied, the ease with which he rewrote reality, was genuinely painful to witness. And Vanessa's death? Was that innocent too? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Vanessa was troubled. More troubled than anyone realized. Her suicide was a tragedy, but not a mystery. She didn't seem troubled when I met with her yesterday, I said, watching his reaction carefully. She seemed frightened of you, Richard. She played me recordings of your conversations. Showed me evidence of the billing fraud. Told me you were planning to frame her for everything. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. More delusions, Elaine. Vanessa and I never had such conversations. She had recordings, I insisted. On her phone. On a thumb drive she gave me. Which conveniently disappeared after her death, I assume? He asked with a dismissive wave. More figments of your imagination. This wasn't working. He was too disciplined, too practiced at denial. I needed to change approach again, take a bigger risk. The police have the thumb drive. I lied. Marcus gave it to them this morning, along with my statement about meeting Vanessa. For the first time, uncertainty crossed Richard's face. That's impossible. The police would have contacted me. Why would they? You're not their ally, Richard. You're their suspect. He stood abruptly, pacing the room. This is absurd. There is no thumb drive, no recordings. Vanessa left a clear suicide note explaining how you pressured her to fabricate evidence against me. A note written under duress, I suggested. Or forged entirely. The police are examining the handwriting as we speak. Richard's composure was cracking. Stop this, Elaine. Stop these lies. You're only making things worse for yourself. I pressed harder. The hidden camera in Vanessa's apartment. Did you know about that? Did you know she was recording everything? That the police have footage of the hours before her death? This was a calculated risk. If Claire had indeed found a hidden camera, and if it had captured anything incriminating, Richard needed to believe the authorities already had that evidence. His face paled. What camera?
What are you talking about?
The one disguised as a smoke detector, I said, watching him closely. Vanessa was smarter than you gave her credit for, Richard. She knew you might turn on her eventually. He stared at me, a muscle working in his jaw. You're bluffing. Am I? Then why did detectives from Homicide visit your office this morning? Why are they interviewing the hospital staff about your whereabouts yesterday evening? It was a complete fabrication, but delivered with enough conviction to plant seeds of doubt. Richard's expression shifted from disbelief to calculation to the first stirrings of fear. This is madness, he said, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. There were no detectives. There is no investigation. Call the hospital, I suggested. Check for yourself. Ask why Detective Ramirez was asking about your schedule yesterday. Richard pulled out his phone, his movements jerky with suppressed anger. Before he could make a call, I delivered the final push. They found traces of midazolam in her system, Richard. Not the kind of sedative someone would typically use for suicide, but perfect for making someone compliant, suggestible. The kind of drug a doctor would know how to administer. His finger hovered over the phone screen, then dropped. Enough, he said, his voice deadly quiet. I don't know what game you're playing, Elaine, but it ends now. No game, I said. Just the truth finally coming to light. Vanessa told me everything before she died. About the fraud. About your plans for me. About how you threatened to frame her if she didn't cooperate. She was lying, he snapped. Trying to save herself by shifting blame. Then why kill her? I asked softly. If she was just lying, why not let her discredit herself? Why silence her permanently? Richard moved closer, looming over me. I did not kill Vanessa.
No?
Then who did? Who had access to her apartment? Who knew her schedule? Who had the medical knowledge to administer a drug that would make her compliant enough to stage a suicide? You have no proof of any of this, he hissed. Don't I? I met his gaze steadily. The thumb drive. The camera footage. The toxicology report. Vanessa's recorded statement. It's over, Richard. The only question is whether you'll go down for fraud or for murder. Something in him snapped. His hand shot out, grabbing my throat, pushing me back onto the bed. You think you're so clever, he snarled, his mask of civilization finally slipping. Always plotting, always manipulating. You think I didn't know what you were doing with your little disappearing act? Your press conferences? Your alliance with Vanessa? I clawed at his hand, my act momentarily forgotten in genuine panic. His grip was frighteningly strong. Vanessa was weak, he continued, his voice a harsh whisper. Sentimental. She actually believed I loved her, that we had some future together. When she realized I was willing to sacrifice her to save myself, she became a liability. Just like you. Richard, I gasped, struggling for air. Security cameras? He glanced up, suddenly remembering where we were. His grip loosened slightly. There are no cameras in patient rooms. Privacy regulations. But uncertainty had crept into his expression. I seized the opportunity. Margaret installed them specifically for my protection. They're recording everything. You're lying, he said, but doubt had taken root. He released my throat, stepping back. No reputable psychiatric facility would violate privacy laws that way. I sat up, rubbing my throat, my voice raspy but triumphant. Why don't we ask Dr. Patterson? I'm sure she'd be happy to show you the footage of you just assaulting me, admitting that Vanessa became a liability, implying you were responsible for her death. Richard's face contorted with rage and fear. You set me up. This entire thing, checking yourself in, asking to see me, it was all a trap. Just like your commitment order was a trap for me. I replied, my composure returning. The difference is my trap worked. He lunged for the door, yanking it open only to find himself face to face with Margaret, flanked by 2 security guards and a man in a suit who was clearly law enforcement. Dr. Blackwell, the detective said formally.
I'm Detective Ramirez.
I'd like you to come with me to answer some questions about the death of Vanessa Sinclair. Richard's gaze shot back to me, hatred blazing in his eyes. This isn't over, Elaine. Actually, Richard, I said calmly, it is. As they led him away, Margaret rushed to my side, examining the reddening marks on my throat. Elaine, are you all right? I was watching the feed. When he attacked you, I called security immediately. I'm fine, I assured her, my voice still rough. Did you get it all? His admission about Vanessa? She nodded. Every word. The recording has already been sent to Marcus and the police. Relief washed over me so powerfully that I sagged back against the pillows. It worked. It actually worked. You took an enormous risk, Margaret scolded, though her eyes were kind. He could have seriously hurt you. It was worth it, I said softly. To finally see the real Richard. To have proof of what he is. Later that evening, after giving my formal statement to Detective Ramirez, I was officially released from Westlake Behavioral. Margaret had certified that I was of sound mind and had been admitted as part of an approved law enforcement operation, not due to any genuine psychiatric concerns. Sophia was waiting for me outside, along with Claire and Marcus. My daughter flew into my arms the moment I appeared.
Mom.
Your neck, are you okay? When we saw the video feed, when he attacked you, I'm fine, sweetheart, I soothed, holding her tight. A little bruised, but nothing serious. Claire hugged me next, her eyes swimming with tears. That was the bravest, stupidest thing I've ever seen anyone do. Don't ever scare me like that again. Marcus remained professionally composed, but I could see the relief in his eyes. Richard's being held without bail, he informed me. The evidence from your confrontation, combined with what we found at Vanessa's apartment, was enough for the district attorney to charge him with assault, conspiracy, and as an accessory to Vanessa's death. Accessory? I repeated. Not murder. They found the actual killer, Claire explained. A former patient of Richard's with a history of violence. Richard had treated him years ago, kept in contact. Phone records show multiple calls between them in the days before Vanessa died. He outsourced the murder, I realized. Of course he did. Richard would never dirty his own hands. The man is already talking, trying to cut a deal, Marcus added. Apparently Richard promised to falsify medical records to help him avoid a prison sentence on another charge. He's claiming Richard provided the sedative and instructed him exactly how to stage the scene as a suicide. I shook my head, still processing the depravity of it all. And the suicide note? Forged, Claire confirmed. The police handwriting experts confirmed it doesn't match Vanessa's writing. They found drafts of it on Richard's home computer. What happens now? Sophia asked, her arms still around my waist. Now, Marcus said, we focus on your mother's legal and financial protection. Given the criminal charges against your father, we have grounds to freeze all assets pending resolution of the case. And with the evidence of billing fraud, the medical board has already suspended his license. It's really over, I breathed, hardly daring to believe it. The criminal case is just beginning, Marcus cautioned. There will be hearings, possibly a trial. You'll need to testify. I'm ready, I assured him. Whatever it takes to make sure Richard faces justice. As we walked to the waiting car, I felt lighter than I had in weeks, perhaps in years. The fear that had been my constant companion since discovering Richard's betrayal was finally subsiding, replaced by a cautious hope for the future. That hope was short-lived. As we approached the car, a figure stepped out from behind a nearby tree. Lawrence Feinberg, Richard's attorney, his expression grim but determined. Mrs. Blackwell, he called. A moment of your time. Marcus moved protectively in front of me. My client has nothing to say to you, Lawrence. Feinberg raised his hands in a placating gesture. I'm not here to serve papers or make threats. I'm here with information Mrs. Blackwell needs to hear. Whatever it is, you can tell me, Marcus replied firmly. It's about Richard's finances, Feinberg said, his gaze fixed on me over Marcus's shoulder. There are accounts you don't know about. Offshore investments. And a life insurance policy. I froze. What life insurance policy? Not yours, Feinberg clarified. Sophia's. Beside me, Sophia stiffened.
What?
Feinberg's expression was somber. Your father took out a $5 million policy on your life last year, Sophia. with himself as the sole beneficiary. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If Richard had been willing to plan my death for financial gain, had he been considering the same for our daughter? The thought was too horrific to contemplate. "Why are you telling us this?" Marcus demanded. "Why betray your client's confidence?" Feinberg's professional mask slipped, revealing genuine distress. "Because I drew the line at murder. I knew Richard was difficult, controlling. I suspected the affair with Vanessa. But when Detective Ramirez showed me the evidence from Vanessa's apartment, the recordings of Richard planning her death."
He shook his head.
"I cannot and will not defend a man who murders to cover his tracks. And I won't stay silent about a potential threat to his daughter." "How do we know this isn't some elaborate ploy?" Claire asked skeptically. "Another of Richard's manipulations with you as his mouthpiece?" "You don't," Feinberg acknowledged. "But you can verify the policy exists. It was issued through Transcontinental Life, policy number TL 774291. Richard kept the paperwork in a safe deposit box at First Manhattan Bank, Box 227. He handed Marcus a small key. "This will open it." "Where did you get this?" Marcus asked, examining the key. "Richard gave me access to certain secure documents in case of his incapacitation or death. Standard procedure between attorney and client." Feinberg's gaze returned to me. "Mrs. Blackwell, whatever you think of me, and I imagine it's nothing positive, please believe that I never knew the full extent of Richard's actions. Had I known, I would have withdrawn my representation much sooner. I studied him, searching for signs of deception and finding none." "I believe you," I said finally, "and I appreciate your coming forward now." He nodded once, then turned to go. "I've resigned as Richard's attorney, effective immediately. He'll find someone else, no doubt. Someone without my newfound scruples." With that, he walked away, disappearing into the gathering darkness. We stood in stunned silence, the implications of his revelation settling over us like a heavy shroud. "A life insurance policy on me?" Sophia whispered, her face pale. "Dad was planning to... "We don't know that," I said quickly, though the fear in my heart suggested otherwise. "It could have been legitimate estate planning." "Like the discussions about your life insurance were legitimate estate planning?" Claire asked pointedly. Marcus pocketed the safe deposit box key. "We'll verify this first thing tomorrow. If the policy exists, we'll have it canceled immediately. And if Dad was planning to..." Sophia couldn't finish the sentence. "Then it's one more charge to add to his indictment," Marcus said grimly. "One more reason he'll never see the outside of a prison again." As we drove away from Westlake Behavioral, the euphoria of Richard's exposure had been replaced by a somber recognition of just how deep his depravity ran. It wasn't enough that he had betrayed me, planned my death, had Vanessa killed. He may have been plotting against our daughter as well, the final, unforgivable transgression. That night, as Sophia slept fitfully in the guest room of Marcus's secure apartment, I sat alone by the window, staring out at the city lights. The woman who had attended her own funeral to expose her husband's betrayal felt like a stranger now, someone braver, perhaps, but also more naive than the woman I had become. I had thought exposing Richard would be the end of the story. Instead, it was just the beginning of a darker chapter than I could have imagined. There would be investigations, trials, possibly more shocking revelations about the man I had loved and trusted for over 2 decades. And yet, despite the pain and fear, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. The truth, however terrible, was finally coming to light. Richard's mask had been ripped away, revealing the monster beneath. He would face justice for his crimes. Sophia and I would rebuild our lives, stronger for having survived his machinations. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire, just heard from Detective Ramirez. They found evidence linking Richard to 2 other suspicious deaths, former colleagues who had threatened to expose irregularities at his practice. This goes deeper than we thought. I wasn't surprised. Once a predator like Richard crossed the line into violence, there was rarely just one victim. How many lives had he destroyed while maintaining his facade of respectability? How many others had suffered while I looked the other way, choosing comfort over confrontation. Another text arrived, this one from Marcus. Safe deposit box verified. Life insurance policy exists as Feinberg described. Working on cancellation. Also found documents suggesting Richard has another identity, another life we knew nothing about. Meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. to discuss. Another identity? Another life? Just when I thought Richard's betrayal couldn't cut any deeper, there was more to uncover. More layers of deception to peel away. I set down the phone, too emotionally exhausted to process these new revelations tonight. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges, fresh pain. But also, perhaps, another step toward justice and closure. Outside, the city continued its restless dance of light and shadow, indifferent to the drama unfolding within its bounds. Somewhere in that vast expanse, Richard sat in a cell, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Did he regret his actions? Did he feel remorse for the lives he had destroyed? Or was he simply calculating his next move, looking for a new way to manipulate the system, to escape the consequences of his actions? It didn't matter. Whatever schemes Richard might devise, whatever lies he might tell, the truth had been set in motion. Like a boulder rolling downhill, it would continue its inexorable path, crushing everything in its way, including the man who had once been my husband. As dawn broke over the city, I made a silent vow. Richard Blackwell would pay for every life he had damaged, every trust he had betrayed. Not just for my sake, or for Sophia's, or for Vanessa's, but for all those who had suffered in silence while he flourished. Justice was coming. And this time, there would be no funeral for Richard to manipulate, no narrative for him to control. Only the cold, hard truth of his crimes laid bare for all to see. The hunter had become the hunted. And I was just getting started. Marcus's tech team called back within the hour. The thumb drive is clean, no malware, no viruses. And the documents appear genuine.
Hospital Lafayette, proper formatting, consistent metadata.
What about the content? I asked, tension coiling in my stomach. Damning, he replied grimly. Emails from Richard to Vanessa explicitly instructing her how to code procedures for maximum reimbursement. Calendar entries showing him in New York on dates he claimed to be at conferences. A spreadsheet tracking billing, optimization with projected revenue increases. And he hesitated. And what? Notes about your daily routines. When you run alone. When you swim at the lake house. Your medication. All labeled, e-contingency plan. My blood ran cold.
He was planning it.
Actually planning my death. If you're watching this, subscribe now, and comment if you've ever discovered someone close to you wasn't who they pretended to be. The mask is about to come off completely. It appears so, Marcus confirmed. Nothing explicit enough for a criminal charge, but the implication is clear, especially combined with the life insurance discussions. I sank into a chair, the reality of it hitting me anew. My husband of 23 years had been methodically plotting my demise. Not in a moment of passion or desperation, but with calculated precision. The man who had held me through 2 miscarriages, who had nursed me through pneumonia, who had vowed to love and protect me until death parted us. Except death wasn't meant to be natural or distant. It was meant to be soon, and by his hand. The phone trace came back too, Marcus continued. The threatening text was sent from a burner phone purchased with cash at a convenience store near the hospital. Near the hospital, I repeated, where Richard was giving his press conference. Yes, but he was on camera the entire time. He couldn't have sent it himself, which meant he had an accomplice. Someone who could move freely while he maintained his public alibi. Someone who knew about Vanessa's comment at my funeral. My sister Claire's face flashed in my mind. What about the trace on Vanessa's phone? I asked. The one she used to record Richard? Confirmed legitimate. The metadata matches the time and location she claimed. So Vanessa's evidence appeared genuine, which meant either she wasn't behind the threat to Sophia, or she was playing an extraordinarily complex game. What's our next move? I asked Marcus. We proceed with caution, he replied. Contact the state medical board with Vanessa's evidence. Begin proceedings for your divorce and financial protection. And most importantly, keep Sophia secure at all times. Sophia, who had been listening silently, spoke up. I should go back to campus. If I'm the target, I'm putting all of you at risk by staying here. Absolutely not, I said firmly. Campus would be even less secure. Too many people, too many access points. Mom, I can't hide forever. I have classes, exams. All of which can be dealt with. I interrupted. Your safety comes first. She looked ready to argue further, but something in my expression stopped her.
Fine.
But I need my books from the apartment if I'm going to keep up with my coursework. My apartment, my pre-Richard apartment that I'd kept as an investment property and that Sophia used when she was home from college. A place Richard knew well. We'll send someone to get them, I said. My notes are specific to my textbooks, she insisted. I need my exact books with my highlighting and margin notes. I sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of her jaw, the same expression I saw in the mirror when I'd made up my mind.
All right.
But we go with security, we don't stay long, and we tell no one we're going there. Marcus looked troubled. I don't like this, Elaine. It could be exactly what they're hoping for, to flush you out to a predictable location. Which is why we'll take precautions, I said. Change cars midway. Use the service entrance. Limit our time there to 15 minutes maximum. He still looked unconvinced, but nodded reluctantly. I'm coming with you. And we take 4 security personnel, not 2. An hour later, we were in motion, Marcus, Sophia, and I in one car with 2 security guards, another car with 2 more guards following at a distance. Halfway to the apartment, we switched to different vehicles in an underground parking garage, a maneuver that would shake any tail not extremely skilled in surveillance. The apartment building was in a quiet corner of the Upper East Side, an elegant pre-war with a discreet side entrance for residents who preferred privacy. We used this entrance, taking the service elevator directly to the 12th floor. The hallway was empty as we approached the apartment door. One security guard checked the apartment first, confirming it was clear before we entered. Sophia went straight to her room to collect her books while Marcus and the security team established positions throughout the apartment. I found myself drawn to my home office, a room I hadn't visited in weeks. It felt strange to be back in this space that had once been my sanctuary before Richard, before the betrayal, before everything fell apart. On my desk sat framed photos of happier times, Sophia's graduation, our family vacation in Greece, Richard and me on our 20th anniversary. I picked up the latter, studying my husband's smiling face. Had he been planning my demise even then? Had he already started his affair with Vanessa? With Claire? The thought of my sister brought a fresh wave of pain. I set down the photo and opened my desk drawer, searching for my spare phone charger. Instead, my fingers encountered a small velvet box I didn't recognize. Curious, I opened it to find a pair of diamond earrings I'd never seen before. Exquisite, expensive, and definitely not mine. A small card tucked into the lid read simply, "For Claire. All my love, R." My hand trembled as I replaced the box. Richard had used my own apartment to hide gifts for my sister. Had they met here? Made love in my bed while I was away at charity functions or board meetings. The violation felt complete, absolute. No space remained untainted by their betrayal. Mom, Sophia called from the hallway. I've got everything. We should go. I composed myself quickly, shutting the drawer and moving toward the door. Coming, sweetheart. We regrouped in the living room, Sophia's backpack now bulging with textbooks. Marcus checked in with the security team, confirming our exit route was clear. 5 more minutes, he said. The second car is repositioning. I nodded, my attention caught by a blinking light on the landline phone. The message indicator showed 3 new calls. Without really thinking, I pressed the playback button. The first message began to play, filling the silent apartment. Claire, it's me. I know you're staying at Elaine's place this week. We need to talk about what happened at the will reading. Call me as soon as you get this. Richard's voice. Calling for my sister. At my apartment. The second message played automatically. Claire, Richard again. Why aren't you answering my calls? We agreed to present a united front. Now Elaine's giving press conferences, and you're nowhere to be found. Call me. And the third. It's me. I don't know what game you're playing, but if you think you can. The morning headline screamed what I already knew. Prominent surgeon arrested in connection with assistant's death. Richard's carefully curated public image, the respected doctor, the grieving husband concerned about his mentally ill wife, had shattered overnight. In his place stood a different portrait, a calculating killer who had orchestrated a young woman's death to silence her. If you've been watching this unfold, subscribe now and comment if you've ever seen justice finally come for someone who thought they were untouchable. The fall is always harder from the top. Marcus's conference room table was covered with documents, financial records, property deeds, passport copies. The paper trail of Richard's secret life spread before us like the pieces of a disturbing puzzle. Richard Wickham, Marcus said, pointing to a passport photo that was unmistakably my husband, though with different hair and glasses. Identity established approximately 8 years ago. Owns property in Costa Rica, maintains accounts in 3 different offshore banks, and appears to make regular trips abroad that coincide with Richard Blackwell's supposed medical conferences. I stared at the unfamiliar name attached to the familiar face. 8 years, I repeated numbly. Before Vanessa. Before any of this. This wasn't a hasty exit plan, Claire observed, flipping through bank statements. This was methodical, long-term preparation. For what? Sophia asked, her voice small. Was he always planning to leave? To disappear? Or to disappear someone else? Marcus said grimly. The life insurance policies, the secret identity, the offshore accounts, these are classic preparations for what we call a ghost escape. Fake your own death or someone else's, collect the insurance, assume your alternate identity, and vanish to a country with limited extradition. The realization hit me with sickening clarity. He was planning to kill me all along. For years. The only thing that changed was adding Vanessa to the plan. And possibly me, Sophia added, her face pale. If Feinberg was telling the truth about my life insurance policy. Marcus nodded soberly. The policy exists, as he said. $5 million, taken out last year when Sophia turned 19. Just old enough that her death wouldn't raise the same red flags as a minor's would. I reached for my daughter's hand, finding it cold and trembling. We've already started the process to cancel it, I assured her. Richard can't hurt you now. Can't he? She asked, her eyes haunted. He's already taken so much. My trust, my sense of safety. The father I thought I knew. I had no answer for that. Richard had indeed stolen something precious and irreplaceable from our daughter, her faith in the man who should have protected her above all others. Detective Ramirez arrived 20 minutes later, his expression grim but satisfied. Mrs. Blackwell, we've connected your husband to Michael Denton, the man who killed Vanessa Sinclair. Phone records, text messages, financial transfers, it's all there. Denton is cooperating fully, hoping for leniency. And Richard? I asked. How is he responding to the evidence? With denial, Ramirez replied. Claims Denton is lying. The evidence is fabricated. Your recording was coerced. He shook his head. Classic narcissistic response. Can't accept that his perfect plan failed. What about the other deaths? Claire asked. The colleagues who threatened to expose him? Ramirez's eyebrows rose. You know about those? Yes. We're reopening investigations into 2 suspicious deaths from the past 5 years. Both former associates of your husband, both ruled natural causes or accidents at the time. Both had recently raised concerns about billing practices at his office. The scope of Richard's crimes was expanding by the hour, reaching back further than I'd imagined. How long had this been going on? How many lives had he taken or destroyed while I remained oblivious? The trusting wife who never questioned her husband's late nights or frequent travels. We've also discovered something else, Ramirez continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase. A woman in Phoenix matching the description of your husband's alternate identity, Richard Wickham, has filed a missing persons report for her husband. What? I stared at him in disbelief. He slid a photograph across the table. A smiling woman in her 30s, attractive in a sun-kissed, southwestern way, stood beside Richard, or rather, Richard Wickham. They were on a beach, his arm around her shoulders, both looking relaxed and happy. "Meet Carolyn Wickham," Ramirez said. "Married to Richard Wickham for 5 years. Works as a nurse at Phoenix Memorial. Reports that her husband, a pharmaceutical consultant who travels frequently, failed to return from his last business trip 3 weeks ago." I couldn't tear my eyes from the photo. Another wife. Another life. Another complete fabrication. 3 weeks ago, I echoed. Right around when I disappeared and was presumed dead. Ramirez nodded. "Our theory is that when you vanished, Richard initially thought his plan had somehow worked, that you really were dead. He told his other wife he had a business trip, planning to return to Phoenix as Richard Wickham once Richard Blackwell had collected your life insurance and arranged for his own disappearance. But I wasn't dead," I said slowly. "I reappeared at the will reading." "Exactly." Throwing his entire plan into chaos. He had to stay in New York as Richard Blackwell to deal with you, which meant Richard Wickham suddenly went missing from his wife's life in Phoenix. The layers of deception were dizzying. Not just a cheating husband, not just a fraudster, not just a killer, but a man living an entirely double life, with another wife who knew nothing of his true identity. "Does she know?" I asked. "This Carolyn, does she know who her husband really is?" "Not yet," Ramirez replied. "We're sending Phoenix PD to interview her today."
Gently.
"She's as much a victim in this as anyone. Another woman who had been lied to, manipulated, used as a prop in Richard's elaborate performance. I felt an unexpected kinship with this stranger across the country who was about to have her world shattered just as mine had been. "I want to talk to her," I said suddenly. Everyone at the table turned to stare at me. "Mrs. Blackwell," Ramirez began cautiously, "I'm not sure that's not as part of the investigation," I clarified. "Afterward. Woman to woman. Wife to wife. She's going to need someone who understands what she's going through." Ramirez considered this, then nodded. "I'll see what I can arrange. But first, we need to discuss your testimony. The district attorney wants to move quickly on the indictment." For the next hour, we reviewed the evidence, my statement, the recording from Westlake Behavioral. Richard would be charged with multiple crimes: conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, accessory to murder, assault, identity fraud, and possibly more as the investigation into the other suspicious deaths progressed. "What about bail?" Sophia asked, voicing the fear we all shared. "Could he get out while waiting for trial?" "Highly unlikely," Ramirez assured her. "Given the severity of the charges, the evidence of flight risk with his alternate identity and offshore accounts, and the potential danger to witnesses, the DA will request he be held without bail. No judge would grant release under these circumstances." Some of the tension eased from Sophia's shoulders. "So he'll stay in jail? We're safe." "Yes," Ramirez confirmed. "Your father will remain in custody throughout the legal proceedings." After Ramirez left, Marcus outlined the next steps for securing our financial future. "I've filed emergency motions to freeze all of Richard's assets pending resolution of the criminal case. Given the evidence of fraud and the pending charges, the court should grant these motions quickly." "What about her home?" I asked. "The Westchester house? As we confirmed earlier, it's solely in your name. Richard can't touch it. Same with your Manhattan apartment. And my tuition?" Sophia asked. "Next semester starts in a month." Marcus smiled reassuringly. "Your trust fund is also secure. Richard established it when you were born, with you as the sole beneficiary and your mother as trustee. He can't access or redirect those funds." Relief washed over me. Whatever else Richard had done, whatever other deceptions he had perpetrated, at least he hadn't managed to destroy our financial security. Sophia would continue her education. We would keep our home. We would survive this. As the meeting concluded, my phone buzzed with a text from Margaret Patterson. "Richard's colleagues at Manhattan Memorial are issuing a statement distancing themselves from him. Hospital board meeting now to discuss revoking his privileges. The empire is crumbling." Indeed it was. The carefully constructed facade of Richard Blackwell, respected surgeon and pillar of the community, was collapsing under the weight of his crimes. One by one, his professional allies were abandoning him, his accolades being rescinded, his reputation disintegrating. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt hollow, a confirmation of just how thoroughly I had been deceived. The man I had loved, had built a life with, had never really existed. He had been a performance, a carefully crafted illusion designed to hide the monster beneath. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself drawn to the box of old photographs I'd retrieved from the lake house. Pictures of our wedding day, of Sophia's birth, of family vacations and holiday celebrations. Richard smiled out from each image, the perfect husband, the doting father. Had it all been an act? Had there ever been genuine love, genuine connection? Or had I been merely a convenient prop in his performance of normalcy? Sophia found me surrounded by scattered photographs, tears streaming down my face. "Mom," she said softly, sitting beside me on the floor. "Are you okay?" I wiped my eyes, embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable moment. Just trying to make sense of it all. To reconcile the father you knew, the husband I thought I had, with the man in that jail cell. She picked up a photo. Richard teaching her to ride a bicycle, his face alight with what appeared to be genuine pride. "I've been doing the same thing," she admitted, looking back at every memory, wondering what was real and what wasn't. "And?" I asked, searching her young face. She shrugged, setting down the photo. "I don't know. I think maybe both versions existed. The dad who loved me, who taught me to ride a bike and checked under my bed for monsters, and the man who could take out a life insurance policy on me and contemplate." She couldn't finish the sentence. "People contain multitudes," I said softly. "Even monsters can experience moments of genuine love, genuine connection." "Is that supposed to make it better?" she asked, an edge of bitterness in her voice. "No," I admitted. "Just more comprehensible, perhaps. The human mind craves narrative coherence. We want people to be all good or all bad. The reality is messier." We sat in silence for a while, surrounded by the photographic evidence of a life that now seemed like an elaborate fiction. "What happens now?" Sophia finally asked. "After the trial, after he goes to prison, what do we do? How do we move forward?" It was the question I had been asking myself since Richard's arrest. How does one rebuild after such complete devastation? How does one trust again after such profound betrayal? "We take it one day at a time," I said, the answer inadequate but honest. "We support each other. We find new purpose. We refuse to let his actions define our futures." She nodded, unconvinced but willing to try. "I was thinking of changing my major," she said after a moment. "From pre-med to psychology. Maybe if I understand how minds like Dad's work, I can help prevent others from being hurt the same way." I put my arm around her shoulders, pride swelling through my grief. "I think that's a wonderful idea." "And you?" she asked. "What will you do?" I hadn't allowed myself to think that far ahead, too consumed with survival, with justice, with making it through each day. But now, with Richard in custody and the immediate danger past, I could begin to contemplate a future of my own making. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "But I know I want to help others who have experienced similar betrayals. Women like Carolyn Whitcomb, who are about to have their world turned upside down. Maybe some kind of support network or advocacy group." Sophia smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes for the first time in weeks. "You'd be good at that. You always know exactly what to say to make things better." The compliment warmed me, a small bright spot in the darkness that had enveloped our lives. "We'll figure it out together," I promised, hugging her close. "One step at a time." The next morning brought news that the grand jury had returned indictments on all charges. Richard would stand trial for his role in Vanessa's death, for the assault against me, for the elaborate fraud he had perpetrated through his medical practice. The district attorney was confident of conviction on all counts. Marcus called with the news as Claire, Sophia, and I were having breakfast in the secure apartment that had become our temporary home. Richard is being arraigned this afternoon, he informed us. The DA is requesting he be held without bail pending trial. Given the circumstances, the judge is almost certain to grant that request. Will we need to be there? I asked, mindful of Sophia's anxious expression. Not necessary at this stage, Marcus assured me. Though the DA would like you to come in tomorrow to prepare for your eventual testimony. The recording from Westlake is compelling, but your first-hand account will still be crucial. After hanging up, I noticed Sophia pushing her food around her plate, her appetite clearly gone. You don't have to be part of this if it's too difficult, I told her gently. Your testimony isn't essential to the case. She shook her head firmly.
No.
I need to do this. Not just for justice, but for me. I need to look him in the eye and show him he didn't break me. Her jaw set in a determined line so like my own. I won't let him win. Claire squeezed her niece's shoulder. That's my girl. The arraignment proceeded as expected, with Richard remanded to custody without bail. The media frenzy intensified, with reporters camped outside the courthouse, outside the hospital, even attempting to approach our secured building before security turned them away. Dr. Death, screamed one tabloid headline. Surgeon's double life exposed, proclaimed another. Richard's face, once featured in medical journals and society pages, now stared out from sensationalist news coverage, his expression in his mugshot a mixture of defiance and disbelief. He still couldn't accept that his carefully constructed world had collapsed, that his manipulations had finally failed him. 3 days after the arraignment, a new development. Phoenix police had interviewed Carolyn Whitcomb and informed her of her husband's true identity. According to Detective Ramirez, she had initially refused to believe it, insisting there must be some mistake, some explanation. Then, they had shown her Richard's mugshot, his real name, the details of his charges. She's in shock, Ramirez told me during his latest update. But she's cooperating fully. Provided access to all their financial records, communications, everything. Turns out he was siphoning money from their joint accounts too, preparing for his eventual disappearance. Has she been told about me? I asked. About Sophia?
Yes.
She knows Richard was married with a daughter in New York. He hesitated. She's asked to speak with you, actually. Said she has questions only you might be able to answer. I nodded, having anticipated this. I'm willing. Whenever she's ready. The call came 2 days later. Carolyn Whitcomb's voice was steady but strained, a woman holding herself together through sheer force of will. Mrs. Blackwell, she began formally. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me. I know this must be difficult. Please call me Elaine, I said. And yes, it's difficult. For both of us. A shaky breath on the other end of the line. I keep thinking I should have known. That there must have been signs. There always are in retrospect, I said gently. But Richard, or Richard Whitcomb, as you knew him, was exceptionally skilled at deception. At compartmentalizing his lives. 5 years, she said, her voice breaking slightly. 5 years of marriage to a man who didn't exist. Who was married to someone else the entire time. Who was planning God knows what. I understood her disorientation, her desperate attempt to reconcile the man she thought she knew with the monster now revealed. I was with him for 23 years, I told her. Had a child with him. Built a life with him. And I never saw what he truly was until recently. How? She asked, the single word laden with confusion and pain. How do we miss something so fundamental? Are we just blind? Stupid? Neither, I said firmly. We trusted. We believed. We saw what we were meant to see, what he carefully constructed for us to see. That doesn't make us blind or stupid. It makes us human. We talked for over an hour, comparing notes on the man we had both called husband. The patterns were remarkably consistent. Charming, attentive when present, frequently traveling for work, secretive about certain aspects of his life, occasionally controlling but always with a veneer of concern. He had a burner phone, Carolyn revealed. I found it once, hidden in his golf bag. He said it was for emergencies, for when his regular phone had no service during his travels. I believed him. I had found something similar years earlier, a second phone in Richard's desk drawer. He had explained it away as a backup, and I had never questioned further. Another red flag ignored, another deception accepted. The police say he has accounts in the Caymans in Switzerland, Carolyn continued. Money he was skimming from his practice in New York, from our joint accounts in Phoenix. Preparing for some final escape. After collecting the life insurance on his wives, I added grimly. She was silent for a moment. Was he planning to kill you? Is that what the police think? Yes, I said simply. There's evidence he was tracking my routines, discussing my life insurance policy with his mistress, planning what they called a permanent solution. A sharp intake of breath. Do they think he was planning the same for me? I hesitated, not wanting to add to her trauma, but unwilling to lie. They're investigating that possibility. Has he taken out any life insurance policies on you? I don't know, she admitted. I'm going through all our paperwork now, trying to figure out what's real and what isn't. By the end of our conversation, a strange bond had formed between us. Two women united by the extraordinary circumstance of having been married to the same man simultaneously, both betrayed in the most fundamental way possible. Will you be at the trial? Carolyn asked as we prepared to end the call. Yes, I confirmed. Will you? I'm planning to come to New York next week, she said. The prosecutor wants my testimony about the fake identity, the financial transfers. And I think I need to see him, to look him in the eye and know that it's really over. I understood the impulse perfectly. Let me know when you arrive. Perhaps we could meet in person. I'd like that, she said, and I could hear the first hint of something beyond pain in her voice, perhaps the beginning of the same resilience that had carried me through my own ordeal. After hanging up, I sat quietly, processing the conversation. Another life destroyed by Richard's machinations. Another woman left to rebuild from the rubble of his deception. But she would rebuild, just as I was rebuilding. Richard had underestimated both of us, had underestimated the strength that women like us possessed. The same strength that had allowed me to fake my own death, to expose his betrayal, to trap him into revealing his true nature. The preliminary hearings began the following week. Richard appeared in court in an orange jumpsuit, his silver hair dulled without access to his expensive styling products, dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights in his cell. He avoided looking at me as I sat in the gallery with Sophia and Claire, his gaze fixed straight ahead with the same arrogant tilt to his chin I had once found distinguished, but now saw as merely the manifestation of his narcissism. Carolyn arrived in New York as promised, and we met for coffee the day before she was scheduled to testify. In person, she was much as her photograph had suggested, attractive, composed, with a quiet dignity that belied the chaos Richard had unleashed in her life. It's strange, she said as we sat across from each other in a private corner of a discreet cafe Marcus had recommended. Looking at you, I can see why he kept us both. We're nothing alike. It was true. Where I was blonde and slim, she was dark-haired and curvy. Where my style tended toward classic elegance, hers was more casual, more Southwestern in influence. We represented different worlds, different aspects of the persona Richard had crafted for each setting. He compartmentalized completely, I observed. Richard Blackwell and Richard Wickham were practically different people. With different tastes, different habits, she agreed. He ate different foods with me than he did with you, preferred different wines, different activities. A perfect chameleon, I said, becoming whatever was needed for each environment. For each mark, she corrected bitterly. Because that's what we were, weren't we?
Marks inelaborate con.
I couldn't argue with her assessment. Richard had indeed treated us like marks, identifying our vulnerabilities, gaining our trust, using us for his purposes while planning our eventual disposal when we were no longer useful. Have you spoken with Janet Phillips? Carolyn asked, changing the subject. The prosecutor mentioned her as another key witness. Yes, she's been incredibly helpful. She worked with Richard for years, saw his pattern of behavior with women, kept records after she left his practice. And Vanessa Sinclair? The woman who died. I hesitated, the wound still fresh. I met with her the day she died. She was turning against Richard, providing evidence of his fraud. That's why he had her killed, to silence her. Carolyn shuddered visibly. It's still hard to believe that the man I shared a bed with, a life with, could orchestrate a murder, could plan to murder me. The most frightening monsters were the most convincing human masks, I said softly. We parted with a hug, an unexpected gesture that somehow felt right, a physical acknowledgement of our shared trauma and the strange sisterhood it had created between us. The next day, Carolyn took the stand. She testified clearly and compellingly about her marriage to Richard Whitcomb, about the discoveries she had made since learning his true identity, about the financial evidence suggesting he had been preparing for a final disappearance that would have left her behind, or worse. Throughout her testimony, Richard remained impassive, his face a mask of controlled indifference. Only once did his composure slip, when Carolyn described finding a notebook in his home office with detailed notes about her daily routines, similar to the ones he had kept about mine. His jaw tightened, a muscle working in his cheek, his gaze finally shifting from the middle distance to Carolyn's face. She met his stare unflinchingly, her voice never wavering as she described the evidence, suggesting he had been planning her death just as he had been planning mine. In that moment, I saw in her the same steel I had found in myself, the unbreakable core that Richard had failed to recognize in both of us. The prosecution's case built steadily over the following weeks. Janet testified about Richard's history of harassment and manipulation, about the billing fraud, about his vindictive response to rejection. Michael Denton, the man who had killed Vanessa, testified in exchange for a reduced sentence, describing in chilling detail how Richard had orchestrated the murder and staged it as a suicide. And then it was my turn. As I took the stand, I finally allowed myself to look directly at Richard. Our eyes met for the first time since his arrest, and what I saw there chilled me to the bone. Not remorse, not shame, not even anger, but calculation. Even now, facing overwhelming evidence of his crimes, multiple witnesses, the recording of his own damning statements, he was still plotting, still strategizing, still looking for a way to regain control. I testified for nearly 6 hours, describing our marriage, my discovery of his affair, the text messages about my life insurance, my decision to fake my death to uncover the truth, the events at my funeral, the confrontation at the will reading. I detailed the threatening text about Sophia, the commitment order Richard had orchestrated, and finally, the revelation at Westlake Behavioral where he had admitted that Vanessa had become a liability and had assaulted me. Throughout my testimony, Richard's attorney, not Feinberg, who had resigned, but a sharp-eyed young woman named Elena Vasquez, attempted to undermine my credibility, suggesting that my disappearance and supposed death had been an act of psychological warfare against my husband, that I had manipulated Vanessa into fabricating evidence, that I had trapped and provoked Richard at Westlake. Mrs. Blackwell, she said during cross-examination, isn't it true that you deliberately created a scenario at Westlake Behavioral designed to provoke an emotional response from your husband? I created a scenario designed to reveal the truth, I replied calmly. A truth that Dr. Blackwell had gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal. By deceiving him into believing you were mentally unstable and vulnerable? By allowing him to believe his own narrative about me, I corrected. A narrative he had carefully constructed and promoted to discredit me. And you recorded this conversation without his knowledge or consent. With the full knowledge and approval of Dr. Margaret Patterson, Chief of Psychiatry at Westlake, and in cooperation with law enforcement investigating Vanessa Sinclair's death. Vasquez shifted tactics. Mrs. Blackwell, you've testified that you feared for your life based on text messages discussing your life insurance policy. Yet isn't it standard financial planning for spouses to discuss such matters? It's standard to discuss them with each other, I replied. Not for one spouse to discuss with his mistress how the policy would provide, enough to start over anywhere we want after the other spouse is gone. The cross-examination continued in this vein, with Vasquez attempting to reframe every damning piece of evidence as innocent, misunderstood, or manipulated by me. But the facts were too overwhelming, the pattern too clear, the corroboration from multiple witnesses too consistent. When I finally stepped down from the witness stand, exhausted but unbroken, Richard's gaze followed me. I could feel its weight between my shoulder blades as I walked back to my seat beside Sophia, who squeezed my hand in silent support. The trial's most dramatic moment came during Richard's own testimony. Against the advice of his attorney, he had insisted on taking the stand in his own defense. It was a dangerous move, opening himself to cross-examination by the prosecutor, but characteristic of his arrogance, his belief in his ability to charm and manipulate any audience. At first, he was everything the jury might expect from a distinguished surgeon: articulate, measured, convincing in his expressions of confusion and hurt at the misunderstandings and misinterpretations of his actions. He painted himself as the victim of a vengeful wife, a disturbed mistress, and an overzealous prosecution. But as the district attorney began his cross-examination, methodically presenting the evidence piece by piece, Richard's composure began to crack. His answers grew defensive, then combative. When confronted with the recording from Westlake where he had admitted Vanessa had become a liability, he claimed his words had been taken out of context, that he had been under duress, that I had manipulated him into saying things he didn't mean. "Dr. Blackwell," the prosecutor said calmly, "are you denying that you grabbed Mrs. Blackwell by the throat during that conversation? Because we have not only the audio recording but video evidence of that assault." "She provoked me," Richard snapped, his mask slipping further. "She was making wild accusations, threatening me with fabricated evidence." "So you admit to assaulting her?" A tense pause. It was a momentary lapse of control, after weeks of psychological torture at her hands. The prosecutor nodded as if sympathetic. "Psychological torture? You mean like faking one's death to observe how one's spouse reacts?" "Exactly," Richard agreed, not seeing the trap. "And how did you react to your wife's supposed death, Dr. Blackwell?" "According to multiple witnesses, you moved your mistress into your home, gave her your wife's clothes and jewelry, and began making plans to sell your wife's possessions." Richard's jaw tightened. "I was in shock. Grief makes people behave irrationally." "Grief," the prosecutor repeated thoughtfully. "Is that also why you discussed your wife's life insurance policy with Miss Sinclair, describing it as enough to start over anywhere we want?" "That conversation was about hypothetical future planning, nothing more." "Hypothetical planning that happened to coincide with notes you kept about your wife's running routes, swimming habits, and medication. Notes labeled a contingency plan." Richard's face flushed with anger. "Those notes were taken out of context. As a doctor, I naturally kept track of my wife's health routines." "And your wife in Phoenix? Were you also tracking Carolyn Wickham's health routines? Keeping notes on her daily activities? Planning for her contingency as well?" "Objection," Vasquez called. "Assumes facts not in evidence." "Sustained," the judge ruled. But the damage was done. The jury had seen the flash of rage in Richard's eyes, the momentary loss of control that revealed the true man beneath the polished exterior. The prosecutor continued relentlessly, presenting evidence of the offshore accounts, the second identity, the connections to Michael Denton. With each question, Richard grew more defensive, more agitated, until finally, when confronted with phone records showing multiple calls to Denton in the hours before and after Vanessa's death, he exploded. "Vanessa was going to ruin everything," he shouted, slamming his hand on the witness stand. "Years of work, of planning, of building something that would finally free me from all of you, from your expectations, your demands, your suffocating presence in my life." The courtroom fell silent, stunned by the outburst. Richard seemed to realize his error immediately, attempting to compose himself, to return to the reasonable, misunderstood doctor he had been portraying. "I mean," he backtracked, "Vanessa was threatening to falsely accuse me of fraud, to destroy my reputation with lies. I was upset, naturally, but I never intended." "You never intended for her to die?" the prosecutor finished. "Just to be silenced? To be frightened into compliance? To understand that crossing Richard Blackwell had consequences?" Richard stared at him, trapped by his own words, by his own arrogance in believing he could outmaneuver the prosecutor just as he had outmaneuvered so many others throughout his life. "No further questions," the prosecutor said quietly, returning to his seat. The deliberations were brief by the standards of such a complex case, less than 8 hours. When the jury returned, their verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Guilty of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. Guilty of accessory to murder. Guilty of assault. Guilty of identity fraud. Guilty, guilty, guilty. As the verdict was read, Richard stood impassively, his face a mask of disbelief not at the outcome but at the failure of his manipulations. Even now, he couldn't accept that his perfect plan had unraveled, that his carefully constructed world had collapsed, that the women he had underestimated had ultimately been his downfall. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following month. Given the severity of the crimes and Richard's lack of remorse, the prosecutor was seeking the maximum penalty, effectively a life sentence, when the consecutive terms were combined. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Flanked by Sophia, Claire, Marcus, and surprisingly Carolyn, I approached the microphones. Today, justice was served. I began, my voice steady despite the emotion welling within me. Not just for me, not just for my daughter, but for Vanessa Sinclair, whose life was cut short because she dared to stand up to a man who thought himself untouchable. For Carolyn Whitcomb, whose trust was betrayed just as mine was. For Janet Phillips and the other women who suffered Richard's harassment and manipulation. I paused, gathering my thoughts before continuing. Richard Blackwell presented himself as a healer, a man who saved lives. But behind that facade was someone who destroyed lives, who used his intelligence, his charm, his position of trust to manipulate and harm those around him. His conviction today sends a message that no one, regardless of their status or influence, is above the law. A reporter called out, "Mrs. Blackwell, do you have any regrets about the methods you used to expose your husband's crimes?" I considered the question carefully. I regret that it came to that I had to take such extraordinary measures to uncover the truth. But I don't regret fighting for justice, for my safety, for my daughter's future. Sometimes, when conventional paths fail, we must forge our own. Another shouted question. What happens now? How do you move forward from something like this? Sophia stepped forward, taking the microphone with a confidence that made my heart swell with pride. "We rebuild," she said simply. "Day by day, piece by piece. We support each other. We find new purpose. We refuse to let his actions define our futures." My own words from that night among the photographs, now spoken by my daughter with conviction and strength. I squeezed her hand, overwhelming love mingling with the grief and relief washing through me. Carolyn spoke next, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "When your life is revealed as a lie, you have two choices: collapse under the weight of that betrayal or use it as a foundation to build something true, something real. We choose the latter." As we turned to leave, a final question rang out. "Mrs. Blackwell, if you could say one thing to your husband now, what would it be?" I paused, looking back at the assembled press. A month ago, I might have had a different answer, something angry, bitter, wounded. But standing here now, with justice served, with Richard facing the consequences of his actions, with my daughter and sister and new allies beside me, I found those emotions had transformed into something else. Not forgiveness, never that, but perhaps a kind of grim clarity. I would say, you underestimated me. You underestimated all of us. And that was your fatal mistake. With that, we walked away, leaving the courthouse and the cameras and, symbolically at least, Richard Blackwell behind us. There would be appeals, of course. The sentencing hearing. Possibly civil litigation to recover funds he had hidden away. The legal aftermath would continue for months, perhaps years. But the central battle was won. The truth had been revealed. Justice had been served. And we, the women Richard had sought to use and discard, had emerged not as victims, but as survivors. Stronger for having weathered the storm of his deception, more resilient for having faced the darkness he had brought into our lives. 1 month later, Richard was sentenced to 65 years in prison with no possibility of parole for at least 40, effectively a life sentence for a man his age. He stood impassively as the judge delivered the sentence, still unable or unwilling to show remorse for his actions, still clinging to the belief that he was somehow the wronged party in all of this. As he was led away in handcuffs, he glanced back once, his gaze finding mine in the gallery. In that brief moment of eye contact, I saw something I had never seen in Richard before. Fear. Not of prison, not of punishment, but of irrelevance. Of being forgotten. Of fading into obscurity while the women he had tried to destroy continued living, continued thriving, continued building lives without him. It was, perhaps, the cruelest punishment of all for a narcissist like Richard Blackwell, to know that the world would go on without him, that his name would become a footnote, a cautionary tale, nothing more. Outside the courthouse for the final time, Sophia, Claire, Carolyn, and I stood together, a united front against the assembled press. But this time, we had no statements to make, no questions to answer. Our story had been told. Justice had been served. It was time to close this chapter and begin writing the next. Ready? I asked my daughter, offering my hand. She took it, squeezing firmly. Ready. Together, we walked down the courthouse steps and into the bright spring sunshine, leaving the shadows of Richard's betrayal behind us. There would be difficult days ahead, certainly. Healing is never linear, never simple. But we would face those days together, with the strength and resilience that had carried us through the darkest moments. As we reached the street, a text message arrived from Janet Phillips. Support group for partners of narcissists, meeting tonight at 7. Thought you might want to come speak. Share your story. Help others recognize the signs you missed. I showed the message to Carolyn, who nodded thoughtfully. I think we should go. Together. If our experience can help even one person avoid what we went through. Agreed, I said, a sense of purpose settling over me. This was how we would transform our pain into something meaningful, by using it to help others, to shed light on the patterns of manipulation and control that had ensnared us, to ensure that Richard's legacy would not be one of destruction, but of education and prevention. 6 months later, I stood at a podium in a conference room filled with women and men of all ages, survivors of narcissistic abuse, family members seeking to understand, therapists looking to better serve their clients. Beside me sat Carolyn, now a close friend and ally in our shared mission. When I attended my own funeral, I began, my voice strong and clear. I thought I was there to expose a betrayal. I didn't realize I was taking the first step on a journey that would ultimately lead to justice, to healing, and to purpose. A journey that would connect me with others who had experienced similar betrayals, who had survived similar manipulations. The room was silent, attentive, every face turned toward me in recognition and solidarity. Richard Blackwell thought he could erase me, replace me, dispose of me when I was no longer useful to his narrative. He thought the same about Carolyn, about Vanessa, about Janet, about all the women who crossed his path. What he failed to understand was that we are not supporting characters in someone else's story. We are the protagonists of our own. I gestured to the room, to the community we had built from the ashes of betrayal. And when protagonists join forces, when we share our stories, when we illuminate the darkness that predators like Richard require to operate, we become unstoppable. As applause filled the room, I caught Sophia's eye where she sat in the front row, her face shining with pride. Beside her, Claire smiled encouragingly. And beyond them, Janet, Margaret, Marcus, and the other allies who had helped turn the tide against Richard's machinations. I had attended my own funeral seeking truth. I had found it, along with justice, purpose, and a new beginning. The woman who had stood in the back of that funeral home, veiled and silent, watching her husband's performance of grief, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, more determined to use her experience to light the way for others. Richard had taken much from me, trust, security, years of my life. But he had failed in his ultimate goal. I was still here, still standing, still living. And that, in the end, was the most complete victory of all. Outside the conference center, as we gathered to celebrate another successful event, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. I opened it, curiosity overtaking caution. The first 2 acts were yours. The final act belongs to me. This isn't over, Elaine. I stared at the screen, a chill running through me despite the warm evening. It was impossible. Richard was in maximum security prison, his communications monitored, his access to phones restricted. This couldn't be from him. Unless there was more to his network than we had uncovered. Unless he had contingency plans we hadn't yet discovered. Unless the final act of his performance was still to come. I showed the message to Marcus, who immediately contacted Detective Ramirez. Within hours, an investigation was launched, prison officials alerted, security around Sophia, Carolyn, and me reinforced. It's probably nothing, Marcus assured me as we gathered in his office to review the security measures. A sick prank from someone who's been following the case in the media, or a desperate attempt by Richard to reassert control from behind bars. But you don't believe that, I said, reading his expression. He sighed, always honest with me. I believe in being thorough, in not taking chances. Not after everything we've been through. I nodded, appreciating his caution while refusing to surrender to fear. Whatever this new threat might be, whether from Richard directly or from some accomplice we had yet to identify, we would face it together with the same determination and resilience that had carried us through thus far. Because if Richard's betrayal had taught me anything, it was this. I was stronger than I knew, more capable than I had believed, more resilient than he had ever given me credit for. And if there was indeed a final act to this drama, I would be ready. Not as the victim Richard had tried to make me, but as the survivor I had become. The game wasn't over. But this time, I knew all the players. I understood the stakes. And I was no longer playing by Richard's rules. Let him try his worst from behind those prison walls. I had attended my own funeral and emerged stronger. I had faced his manipulation and violence and emerged victorious. I had rebuilt my life from the rubble of his betrayal. Whatever came next, I would be ready. Because when you've already died once and come back, you learn that endings are really just beginnings in disguise. And my new beginning was just getting started.